What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing story. What if Naruto was adopted by the Kazekage and became the third prince of Suna? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creatory of this masterpiece creation. It has been 5 years since the end of the Third Great Ninja War and the defeat of the Nine Tails. Unlike his original counterpart, Naruto Uzumaki has normal red hair instead of his regular yellow blonde. Naruto has green eyes, and Naruto has everyday life. He is neglected and mistreated by his family. His father, Minato, treats Naruto like an outcast and doesn't want anything to do with him. Naruto's twin brother, Menma, beats up Naruto and hurts names as a demon spawn or monster to make him weak and pathetic. Still, Kushina has looked after her sons equally and is currently 5 months pregnant, and all of the abutment and punishment are done behind her back. She would catch Menma beating up Naruto a few times, only to make Menma angry and want his brother gone. One day while Minato is in the Hokage Tower and Kushina is out to do shopping, Menma hatches an evil prank that would cause so much pain and embarrassment that it could get Naruto to leave because Menma has the Nine Tails chakra while Naruto only has the soul. Menma's plan was to have a bucket of water above one of the door frames and it would be hot water, then he would have tacked on the floor so they would hurt Naruto's feet, but he couldn't find Naruto within the house as he didn't notice that their mother has taken Naruto with her. My only chance to be rid of him and he's not here. Fine, I'll do my plan tonight, but a different one, he said with a smirk on his lips as he just went to his room. Then he trashes his room so he could try and blame it on Naruto. A couple of hours later, Kushina had returned with Naruto from the market and was welcomed by Menma, who was just putting on an act letting their guard down. Kushina put Naruto down, then she went into the kitchen to make dinner while both boys went to their rooms as Menma is trying to plan this carefully as Menma knew their father would be home soon, so Menma summoned a simple log clone to help him to tie himself up. With a smirk on his face, he waited to hear the door open, and once it did, Naruto found his brother all tied up. "Menma, what happened to you?" he said, worry for his brother's safety, and tried to untie him. Menma started panicking and screaming, making both their parents run up the stairs to what they thought was Naruto, tying up his brother, Naruto. Minato shouted as he went over to them and gently shoved Naruto out of the way. Then Kushina came up to them. "Naruto, please explain," Kushina said as Naruto started to panic and tears were about to come out. I found him like this. I was trying to untie him," he said, but then Menma yelled, "No, you weren't. You tied me up and then trashed my room," he said. Then Kushina opened Menma's door and was shocked to see how much destruction had happened. She then turned to Naruto, "Go to your room now. Naruto, you won't be getting dinner tonight, now go," she said as Naruto's heart sank and tears streamed down his face, leaving Menma with an evil smirk on his lips. But he isn't done with his brother just yet. Half an hour later, Kushina felt down for yelling at Naruto and was about to get up and go see him, but then Menma got in front of his mother. "Don't worry mommy, I'll go get Naruto for you," he said, playing up an act that even Minato noticed it but chooses not to do anything about it. "Okay, tell him that he can come down for dinner, Menma," Kushina said, and Menma nodded and ran up the stairs with a dark smirk. Menma was going up there so he could beat up his brother and make sure he was so broken he would leave. Naruto was sitting on his bed and was sighing when he heard someone running up the stairs. Then, he was surprised when Menma came in charge of him and started beating the living daylights out of Naruto, calling him hurt names and telling him that their mother doesn't love him anymore and that she thinks he's a monster. Even with Naruto begging and pleading his brother to stop, Menma kept beating up Naruto. "I always hated you, Naruto, you're too good. You're a weak excuse of a human being. We wished you were never born, to begin with," Menma said. Then he picked up Naruto and threw him to Naruto's desk table, and it was broken upon impact. With his dirty work done, Menma smirked, then patted himself to get the dust off and sweat off him. Once done, he returned downstairs to tell the biggest lie. "Well, is Naruto coming down, Menma?" Minato asked as he tried to hold back a smirk since he knew what Menma had done. "Why no, father? He wishes to remain in his room without dinner," he said. Then Kushina felt something was off, but before she could check on Naruto, Menma spoke up. "Mother, could I have some more food, please?" he said, and then Kushina nodded. "Sure, I'll be right back," she said, then she went into the kitchen, back with Naruto. He was writing a letter for either his granny Tsunade, his beloved aunt Makoto, or his real brother Sasuke, hoping to find his letter as he left it on his wrecked bed. Then he packed up his stuff and left his home outside his window. 3 weeks later, Naruto was on the streets living in dark alleyways and trying to get food as much as he could, but no one even recognized him since he was very dirty and the people of Konoha didn't have time to care for a homeless child or even noticed him. One night Naruto was sitting alone on a swing in a park, but what happened next will change his life forever as he looked to his left and saw another kid who he has never seen before. Hi. He said as the kid just stared at him, but then after a small bit of silence the kid spoke up. Hi. I'm Gaara, wanna play? He said with a smile on his face, and this lit up Naruto. Sure. But before Naruto could say anything else, Gaara's mother Kurora had an annoyed and angry expression as she had her hands on her hips. Gaara. I thought I asked you not to run away from me. She said, wanting to hear what he has to say. I'm sorry mother, I saw Naruto here alone, so I ask if he wants to play. Kurora looked at Naruto on the swing, then she went over to Naruto, kneeled and took out a cloth from her pocket. You poor thing. Why aren't you with your family? She asked, being all motherly to Naruto, and showed him kindness for the first time since he ran away from home. Naruto started to explain his story and his reason to leave his home, and this news shocked Gaara so much that his sand started to flare up, and Kurora was so shocked that she was speechless. Then she turned to her son. Gaara. Please calm down, we don't want other people to know about you. She said as Gaara nodded and returned his sand inside his sand guard. Then without a second thought Kurora picked up Naruto, then she sniffed the air. Phew. Once we get to our hotel, you're getting a bath, mister. She said with giggle. Then she turned around, taking Gaara's hand and taking both of them back to the hotel that their family were staying in. Half an hour later, Kurora and Gaara returned to their hotel with Naruto, who was so tired from trying to stay awake for the past few days that he finally passed out, resting his head on Kurora's shoulder. That she giggled just as they returned to the lobby. Then she looked at her son. Gaara. She said. Then her son looked up at her. Yes mother? What is it? He asked, then noticed a bright smile on her face. How would you like to have another brother? She said as Gaara's eyes widened and looked at Naruto, then back at his mother. If it's about Naruto, then yes, I would love him as another member of the family. He said, making his mother showing a happy face again, and giggled. Now let's go and see your father, he should be back by now. She said as Gaara smiled, then nodded as he followed his mother back to their room. Upon returning to their room, Rasa was standing at the window. Then he turned around to see his wife and son had returned. Kurora. Gaara. Where have you both been? I was worried about you both. He said. Then he walked up and finally noticed something on his wife. Kurora. Who is this boy? He asked, looking a little puzzled. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, and please keep your voice down, dear, he's sleeping. She said. Then Rasa stepped aside so Kurora could put Naruto to bed. Just then Kankuro and Temari came into the room from the bathroom after brushing their teeth and washed their faces. Both siblings were confused as they watched their mother put a strange boy in one of the beds. Mother, what's going on? Temari asked. Kurora turned to her family while Gaara sat on the other bed, watching over Naruto. Kurora, please explain why we have the fourth Hokage's son. Rasa asked, and Kurora started explaining what Naruto had told her and Gaara. Once she finished telling her the story, Temari and Kankuro were shocked that Naruto's family would do something like that to him. Then Rasa said, if you want, Naruto, let our children have a say in this. Kurora nodded, and then she and Rasa looked over to Gaara. I already said yes, father, Naruto is staying, he said. Then Temari walked over to Naruto, seeing the young boy sleeping peacefully, but a sudden urge for protection rushed over her as she gently placed her hand on Naruto's cheek and gently rubbed it, making Naruto purr. Temari paused, then slowly sparkled in her eyes and a wide smile as she got on the bed and petted Naruto's cheek. Oh my Kami, he's staying. He's staying. She giggled and stroked him, hearing his cute purring. Temari, please stop doing that and let him sleep. Kurora giggled, and then Temari pouted. No fun, she said, making her family laugh but not so loudly. Then Rasa and Kurora looked at Kankuro. Hey, if my brother and sister say he's staying, then I'm saying he's staying too, mother, he said, making their mother feel like the happiest woman in the shinobi world. It is late morning, the sun rises in the morning and its rays shine through the window and hit Naruto's face, making him wake up slightly. He sits up and yawns, cutely covering his mouth. Then once he is done he places his hand back down but felt something was laying next to him as he felt an arm, and he looked to his left to see Temari laying in bed with him. Huh. he said quietly. Then he looked to his right and saw the woman who had taken him in last night. "Ah, good morning little one," she said, and gently petting Naruto's head. "How are you feeling?" she asked, which Naruto was a little shy at first. Then he spoke up. I felt a lot better." He started, then looked to his left again, then back up to Kurora. "Who is she?" he asked curiously. Then Kurora giggled a little. "Why, she's going to be your sister. Once my husband Rasa comes back with the adoption papers, you'll be officially adopted and part of our family," she said to Naruto, showing him a reassuring smile. Naruto blinked a few times, looking deadpan. Then he got up and jumped onto Kurora and cuddling her. Thank you, he said as he tries to hold back tears and trying not to wake up Temari. Kurora had a sweet smile on her face. "Now, let's get you that bath," she said as she carried Naruto into the bathroom, run the hot tap. Then she stripped Naruto, but once she noticed Naruto's body she was shocked. "Oh my gosh. How did you even survive all this time?" She was shocked enough that she recollected herself. "In fact, don't answer that, Naruto. Let's just get you washed and I'll make sure you're well fed before we head home today," she said as she picked up Naruto, then gently placed him in the tub and started washing him, making sure Naruto is squeaky cleaned. 5 minutes currently still being washed. Naruto had a smile on his face that never went away, but then he had a curious expression as he and Kurora turned to the bathroom door to see Temari standing there. "Oh, thank goodness. I thought he ran away," she said as she then joined her mother and Naruto by sitting at the bottom on the bathtub, but Naruto turned her back to her so Temari doesn't see his front body. "What's the matter, Naruto? Too shy to face your new sister?" she giggled and slightly teased Naruto. "Temari, please don't tease him like that." Even it was adorable seeing Naruto's cheeks blushing a bit, she said. Then Temari nodded. "I'm sorry mother, just wanted to show Naruto what our humor is like, that's all. I didn't mean to make him blush," she said as she then stood up from the tub and crossed her arms. "It's quite alright Temari. You take a turn to clean your new brother. I'm going to make us breakfast so we have a long way to go today," she said as Temari nodded as Kurora left the bathroom. Then Temari took her turn to wash Naruto as he slowly turned his head, still a bit blushing. "Are you okay, Naruto? Did I embarrass you too much?" she asked, not wanting to scare her new family member, but Naruto shook his head and softly smiled. "No, it's alright. I just need to get used to your humor, Temari," he said, reassuring her with a sweet smile. Temari continued washing Naruto that she didn't mind doing it until he's fully clean. "Oh, by the way Naruto, did you know you can purr when someone rubs your cheeks?" she said with a smile as Naruto was a little puzzled of what did she mean as he tilted his head and looked confused. "I can purr?" he said, sounding confused. Temari nodded with a smile. "You sure can, little brother," she said. Then she cupped his right cheek and gently rubbed it and Naruto started purring. "Oh gosh. I didn't know I could purr," he said, but noticed that Temari hasn't stopped and he blushed a little. Both of them heard someone giggling as they both looked at the bathroom door to see Kurora standing there. Now, you're both too young to start dating," she said. Then she couldn't hold back her laugh the moment both Naruto and Temari blushed like tomatoes and looked surprised by their mother's words. After Naruto's bath, Kurora stepped in to take over as Temari left the bathroom and went back to her bedroom to get changed, while Gaara and Kankuro were eating breakfast until their hotel room door opens up and it was their father who has returned from seeing the Hokage about adopting Naruto, as Rasa was happy that Minato didn't put it together who they were adopting, as Kurora came through with a now cleaned and dressed Naruto. "Well?" she asked, but Rasa was a little pouty. "Could have said, 'Hi honey, but it's officially Naruto is now one of us,'" he said as everyone has smiling faces. Even Naruto was happy to hear that he won't be coming back to the village anytime soon. 4 days later, after Rasa and his family had made it back to Sunagakure with Naruto, who was happy to be with them, and on the way Naruto had bonded so well with his new siblings that he started to call them his brothers and sister. Even Rasa and Kurora loved having Naruto around, even it has been 5 days together. Back at the 4th Hokage compound, Kushina was a little worried about Naruto as she hasn't seen her son for weeks now, but she seems to be trusting too much of Menma's words. But she finally got a chance when Minato took their son with him to the Hokage tower, and she was about to go upstairs to his room until she got a knock at her door. "Oh, for Kami's sake. I just want to see my son," she said, being frustrated, and she is at breaking point for her husband and son from stopping her to see Naruto. But she went up to the door and it was her old friend Makoto along with Tsunade, who thought it would be good to visit them. Makoto brought Sasuke along too because he missed his childhood friend and wanted to see if Naruto was okay as he hasn't seen Naruto for a long time either. "Oh hey everyone," Kushina said with a smile as she left the three of them in the house, and they stood in the hallway. "What brings you three here? And hello, Sasuke, how is the heir of the Uchiha clan?" she said with a smile, but Sasuke had a sad expression and hung his head down. Sasuke, with a cheerful face, smiled up at Kushina. "I'm good, Aunt Kushina. I wanted to play with Naruto," he said sweetly. Even Kushina couldn't help but be so girly over him. "Ah. Well, I was about to check on him. Maybe he could be happy to see you. Go on up," she said, and without a second, Sasuke smiled brightly and ran upstairs to Naruto's room. Meantime Kushina sat with Tsunade and Makoto to check up on things. "So tell me Kushina, are you still planning to train both your sons next year?" Tsunade asked. Kushina nodded and then turned to face Makoto. "If you want, Makoto, I could train Sasuke too, and we could take turns," she said as Makoto pondered for a minute and then looked at Kushina. "That's a great idea, though there is still something off about Menma that I still don't like," she said. Then Tsunade spoke up. "I agree with Makoto, there's just something off about him Kushina," she said, but when Kushina was about to say something Sasuke was right next to Tsunade surprising the three. "Sasuke? What is the matter, son?" Makoto asked. Then Sasuke passed Naruto's letter to Tsunade. "I found this in Naruto's room. And his room is a mess, like if someone had broken in or something." The women had shocked faces as Kushina spoke up. "Makoto, please go see what Sasuke is talking about. I can't move being this big," she said as Makoto nodded. Then she rushed upstairs to see what Sasuke saw in Naruto's room. Tsunade opened the letter, and despite the handwriting being a little messy, she could understand what Naruto meant. It details his reason for leaving, that Menma attacked him after Naruto was blamed for something he didn't do, and that Menma threw him around his room and beat him up to the point of breaking a few bones. Naruto's letter explains that even his father doesn't like Naruto being around and probably was in on Menma's plan, but his letter explains that he forgives his mother. She was only doing what a mother should be doing. Tsunade's blood boiled as she looked at Kushina with so much anger she wanted to kill someone. "Tell me, Kushina, did Minato or Menma check on Naruto for you?" Her voice almost sounded venomous, and she just put it far into Kushina's soul. "Both of them took turns?" She started speaking but then continued. "Why? What did Naruto say?" she asked then. Tsunade passed the letter to her, and before Kushina read it, Makoto came back downstairs, looking very worried. "Naruto's room has been trashed, and he's not here," she said with a hint of worry and panic. Then Kushina's eyes widened as she read the letter, but Sasuke didn't know what was happening and stared at everyone. Tears started to stream down Kushina's face, and some drips hit the letter as she clenched her fist and crushed the letter. "Those sick bastards," she said as her hair started to stick out and spread. Still, Makoto came to her and placed her hands on her shoulders. "Please calm down. Remember, you're pregnant," she said, trying to calm herself down. Still, she noticed the letter and took it from her hand as Kushina slowly calmed down. Makoto read the letter, and she too now knew her anger, but before anyone else said anything, the front door opened and entered Minato and Menma, who were surprised to see Makoto, Sasuke, and Tsunade in their home. "Oh, hey everyone," he started. Still, Tsunade stood up and crossed her arms, looking so angry she wanted to kill them both as both Minato and Menma froze in place and were scared of her. "Sasuke, please take Aunt Kushina to our home, and tell your father or your brother. I won't be long," she said, her voice sound of anger and hateful as Sasuke nodded his head then took Kushina's hand and the two went past them and out of the door as tears are still streaming down Kushina's face. Still, Minato was puzzled about what happened when he asked his wife. Still, Tsunade grabbed Minato by the collar of his shirt, pinned him hard on the wall, and even scared Menma. "You sick bastard, you don't deserve my daughter anymore," she said as Minato saw how much anger was coming from her. "Wait, what's going on?" Minato asked as he looked at Makoto, who was just as angry at him. "Cut the bull crap Minato, and we found Naruto's letter. And let's say if Kushina hadn't been this far into her pregnancy, we would have let her end you," she said, but then Menma tried to strike at Tsunade. Still, Makoto grabbed his little arm. "And you don't come near your mother or my clan. Got it?" she yelled, scaring Menma. He nodded out of fear, and then he was let go. He ran to hide under the dining table while Minato got a powerful punch to the face, went through the wall, and landed on his back to the ground. "Wait, please," he begged. Still, Tsunade wasn't having it. "You stay away from my daughter Minato and my grandchildren." Still, Menma is now disowned from the Uzumaki and Senju clan and will be expecting some papers sometime today. "I will be there to be sure you sign them," she said as she walked past him. Makoto also joined her as the two were going to catch up with Kushina and Sasuke. 7 years have passed since Naruto was accepted by the Kazekage, and Rasa and his family have adopted the last name Hirano, meaning flat, calm, plain, and calm about it seems to be a good morning in the sand village of Suna. Kankuro and Naruto were running away scared from a soaking wet angry sister known as Temari. "How did you not know the plan would backfire, Kankuro?" Naruto said, always managing to keep up with Kankuro's running speed. "Don't rub it in, Naruto. How was I supposed to know it was Temari coming toward us?" Kankuro said, but when they both looked back, they saw Temari was hot on their trail. The two brothers panicked and started to pick up gear, trying to get away from her. "Naruto. Kankuro. Come here and let me show you some sisterly love." She spoke softly, then yelled angrily, making the two just run faster than never before. "We said we're sorry, big sister." Naruto yelled as he always called Temari big sister and not by her name sometimes. "Sorry isn't good enough. Naruto." She yelled as she also picked up the paste, wanting to hurt her brothers very badly, but standing at the window of the Kazekage office was Gaara watching over the streets and just happened to see his siblings going at it. "What is it, Gaara?" Kurora asked as she came up to the window. Gaara doesn't need to do anything with their mother and knows everything about them. But as soon she approaches the window, she is slightly annoyed. "Oh goodness, Sake. What did those two do this time?" she said as she started to summon some sand. Kurora sends the sand to capture her sons and daughter, and she commands the sand to bring them to the office, but once they capture them, Naruto and Kankuro panic more. "Oh no. Mom's seen us running." Naruto, who is very scared of her, said, "This is bad, this is bad." Kankuro said as they saw their father's window, but Temari wasn't afraid. She was smirking, knowing those two would be in trouble once inside. Naruto and Kankuro were forced to sit on the sofa with their heads hung down, and their eyes clenched shut, getting ready to be scolded by their mother. Even Temari, who was standing by the window, crossed her arms and smirked, getting prepared to see them being scolded, but never came any yelling nor scolding as the two looked up to their mother only to see her looking happy. "Now boys, you promised me you wouldn't prank your sister," she said, and waiting to see what they would say. We didn't mean it, mother. Our prank was for Gaara." Naruto said, then Kankuro said, "Yeah, we didn't know Gaara was already here. It was an accident. We tried saying sorry, but we just ran for our lives." Kankuro said that he and Naruto looked at Temari, who was displeased by the prank. "Temari, please stand beside me," Kurora said, and Temari did as she was told. Meanwhile, Rasa and Gaara stayed well back, knowing that both women were too scary, and in this universe, Gaara's seals were more prepared than messed up like his original counterpart. "Now then, boys, before your father has something to say, would you like to say something to your sister?" she said. Then she looked into both boys' eyes and said they all wanted to apologize as they nodded. Kankuro spoke up first. "I'm sorry, sis, but it's the truth. Our prank was never meant for you. There is no excuse. I am sorry," he said. Then Temari looked at Naruto, whose head hung down once more. Temari kneeled before Naruto, placed her hand on his chin, and tilted his head. "Well, Naruto, what do you have to say?" she said as she waited for Naruto to respond. Naruto sighed and hung his head down. "I'm sorry. I learned from my past mistakes that I hurt you too much in your feelings." Naruto started, then he continued. "I always wanted to be sure I never hurt you ever again. The last thing I wanted was to lose you," he said, not knowing he bluntly said the last bit out loud, leaving Temari blushed. Even Kankuro and Gaara were surprised at Naruto's small confession, but Rasa and Kurora knew that those two would be a good couple one day. Still, they aren't letting them date just yet. Then Temari places her hand on Naruto's shoulder. "Naruto. That was the sweetest thing you've ever said," Temari said as Naruto was a little puzzled, but then it clicked to what he said out loud, and he covered his face out of embarrassment. "Oh Kami. I didn't know I said that out loud. He muffled, making Temari giggle. Then she petted Naruto's head. It's okay, Naruto, that was very sweet, she said, gripping his hair and hurting him a bit. But next time, I will not be so kind. She said as her face changed from gentle and kind to right out angry. Okay. I'm still so sorry, Temari, but it's like Kankuro said, the prank wasn't for you. He finished speaking, then Temari picked up Naruto with ease, sat in his place on the sofa, then had Naruto on her lap, making everyone a bit deadpan to expect their parents. Ah, so cute, Kurora said, then she giggled. Naruto was more dumbfounded as he blinked a few times and then turned his head to face Temari. I'm a little old for this, he said, but Temari spoke up again. Oh, pipe down. I'm comfy, so stay there, and I won't hit you with my giant fan, she said, and as by magic, she was holding her fan, and it lay on her shoulder, making Naruto tremble in fear and nod at her. Ahem. Rasa cleared his throat. Now that you're here, we are going on a trip to Konoha for the Chunin exams, he said, then noticed his son's reaction. Naruto, I know it would be hard for you to do back there, but I assure you that your family will look after you, he said, then he looked at Temari. Now you made a promise years ago that you'll protect him, so that makes Naruto your responsibility, alright, he said as Temari nodded. Then she wrapped her arms around Naruto's stomach, knowing it annoyed him. Temari. Stop that, he said, but all Temari smiled and shook her head, making Naruto grumble. Now, just to be sure you all behave, your mother will be your team sensei. Rasa said as the four siblings had their jaws dropped and looked up at her. Seeing a sweet smile on her face, they knew what she was like when you pissed her off. Now you'll have a fifth member of the team. He started. Then in comes a new member, and his name is Kase. As he walked into the office, he said, Lord Kazekage, you wish to see me? Everyone looked at him. When Naruto saw him, Kase's face looked like someone he knew. Ah, Kase, welcome, and yes, you will be joining my sons and daughter for the Chunin exams, and maybe you'll find the answers you've been looking for, he said as Kase nodded and waited for further orders from Kazekage. Kase is around Naruto's height. He also has brown eyes and blonde hair, and he's wearing a gray mesh shirt and a teal-colored undone short-sleeved kimono. He also wears red wristbands, wrappings from his ankles up to his knees, and black shorts. So, where are you from, Kase? Kankuro said, but Kase just shrugged. Heck if I know. I only know that for 12 years of my life, I've been nothing but a test subject to some snake man. He said, leaving the group puzzled except Rasa, who cleared his throat. Well, all we know that Kase here had escaped from Orochimaru. He started, then he continued, one of our weekly patrols found him just the border of sand, and they brought him back to Suna 2 days ago. He explained, then the group looks at him, but something about Kase is just bugging Naruto at the point that he hopes it will come to light sooner or later. Gaara with his unfazed expression and arms crossed looking at Kase. Tell us, how did you escape anyway? He asked, then Kase looked at him and tilted his head looking a little puzzled. Oh. I heard that old snake man he was planning to invade some village. It wasn't clear what one since there's a lot of talking from other shinobi at once. He partly explained as the others listened, so I just waited, then finally after waiting for 3 weeks, they left and only left behind some weak shinobi to look after me, so I just knocked them all down with one punch and checked out of there. He said as he put his hands at the back of his head and everyone seems to be dumbfounded. Alright, team, if we're done talking, we're leaving tomorrow, Kurora said as they all nodded. Then she turned to Kase. Now, Kase, I understand you just arrived yesterday, so you're welcome to stay with us, she said, then Kase bowed. You're too kind, thank you, he said. Then he straightened himself up and followed the family to their home. Everyone was waiting at the gates for Naruto and Temari the next day, but they were a few minutes later. Those two, Kurora said as she got slightly annoyed with her son and daughter being this late. Then she saw them coming, but she and the team had to laugh just at Naruto being held under Temari's arm with a cheek smirk on her face. Told you I'd get you, Naruto, she said as she walked with her brother to the gates. Okay, what did you two get up to? Their mother asked with a smile and her arms crossed. Oh, nothing, mother, he just bet me that I couldn't catch him before we got here, Temari said, earning a puzzled look from their mother, who seemed a little curious. Well, what did you win, Temari? Kurora asked, but a smirk appeared on Temari's lips. Oh, just this, Mom, she said as she cupped both Naruto's cheeks and kissed him full in the mouth right in front of their family, shocking their mother and Gaara. But Kankuro just laughed at his brother for losing to their sister. Looking annoyed, Kurora spoke up, "Temari. I said no dating until Naruto's 13th birthday." She crossed her arms and tapping her finger on her right arm as both Temari and Naruto stood up straight and looked very nervous and waterfall of sweat coming down their heads. "Sorry, Mom," Temari said, blushing very red after what she had done. Even Naruto was blushing like a tomato and couldn't say anything but drool. Then his nose started to bleed, thinking of dirty thoughts about his sister. Gaara grabbed his brother's wrist and dragged him along. "Come on you, time to go." Gaara said Naruto couldn't do anything and was being dragged and dreaming about Temari. "This family is a little weird," Kase said as he didn't realize he said this out loud and right next to Kurora. "Oh, don't worry, you'll get used to this, Kase," she said as Kase blushed. "Sorry, Kurora-sensei, I didn't know I said it out loud," he said, but Kurora waved it off. "Oh, don't worry. It's not the first time we got called weird," she said reassuringly as the group headed off on their 3-day journey to Konoha. 3 days later, the group finally arrived at Konoha, but instead of guards greeting them, it was Team 7, and the members were Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha, and Sora Uchiha, their sensei Kakashi, and a Uchiha member waiting on them. "Ah, greetings, Lord Kazekage, it has been a long time," the Uchiha said. Then Rasa came up to him and placed his hands on his shoulder. "Kimba, it's been so long. How has your new family been?" he asked as Kimba showed a smile. "They're good, though I don't know the reaction we'll be having today," Kimba said as Rasa nodded in agreement. Naruto came out from behind his mother, and there was a sight of sore eyes as Sasuke lowered his guard, unfolding his arms, and his eyes widened. "Naruto," he said as Naruto looked at Sasuke, then he smiled. "Hey, Sasuke," Naruto said, then Naruto showed his signature bright smile, but without warning, Sasuke just tackled his old friends and hugged him. "Whoa. Slow down, Sasuke." Naruto chuckled as Sasuke eased up and blushed a little. Then, he got himself up and helped Naruto up. Then, just as everyone was about to turn around to hear what Kimba had to say, they all saw Sakura trying to make her move on Gaara. Her silly flirts made him laugh, but Kurora was a little overprotective as she had a bit of her clothing in her mouth and was trying her best to hold back. "Now, if you all shall follow me to the Uchiha district, I shall be showing you where you'll be staying for the Chunin exams," he said as everyone nodded. Still, Kakashi spoke up. "Wait a minute, Kimba, they need to see Lord Fourth first." Kakashi said hearing the title made Naruto's blood boil, but he is lucky to have a family to support him. Temari has her arms around his neck, and their cheeks touch. "Sorry, Kakashi, I was giving orders from Lord Third himself, and only Rasa will see Lord Fourth about the exams," Kimba said, leaving Kakashi annoyed as he shine away to inform Minato about their arrival. Suddenly, Temari, Kurora said annoyingly. Then, Temari and Naruto separated, not wanting to anger their mother anymore, but several minutes later, everyone made it to the Uchiha district and was granted inside. "Wow. I forgot how amazing this place was," Naruto said as he jogged around a little. Temari followed him closely. "Wait up, Naruto," she said as Naruto looked back and smiled. Then he reached out, held her hand, and accepted her feelings again as they went around the district looking around old places he used to play at when he used to hang around with Sasuke. Kurora was so rageful that she had a bit of her clothing in her mouth again. "I told them no dating," she said. Then Rasa came up and placed his hands on his wife's shoulder. "Leave them be, sweetie. If they're happy, then they're happy to be together," he said as Kurora calmed down and slightly accepted their love. However, she will still be protective over her son and daughter. "Now, please behave, sweetie," Rasa started, then he turned to Kimba. "Only if Naruto and my wife are okay with your plan, Kimba, just bring it up gently for Naruto. He had a rough life before we met him," he said as Kimba smiled softly, then nodded. "I will bring it up slowly. That depends on my wife's reaction." He sighed and chuckled as Rasa walked off to talk to Fourth Hokage as the others were still being led to Kimba's home. "Are you sure Naruto will handle it, Kimba?" Kurora asked. "I hope so. And it still depends on her too," he said as they continued to Kimba's home, which looks like a mansion and can hold up everyone in the group. Once the group let Naruto and Temari have fun, Kurora spoke up. "Okay, you two, please come back here. We need to go." she said as they nodded and went over to their family. Okay, Mom, hope we didn't make you mad this time, Naruto said. Korora was about to say something, but she chose not to. No, you didn't, Naruto. You and Temari are pleased to do as you want, she stated, leaving her son and daughter speechless. Then they both looked at each other. Well, I'm still willing to keep to mother's promise, Temari. Naruto said as Temari smiled and nodded in agreement. Yeah, I'm still keeping my promise. I'm still waiting until you're 13, she said. Then she was surprised by Naruto kissing her cheek. They heard their mother sigh in relief. Thank you both. I know I've been hard on you too, but I am your mother, after all, she said as Naruto and Temari nodded. Then, everyone followed Team 7 and Kimba back to Kimba's home compound. Kimba went into his home first. Oh, lovable Crazy Red, I'm home, and I got our guests, he said, but suddenly got tackled by twin 6-year-old sons Yuki and Yuma, who hugged their father. Welcome home, father, they both said in unison, with bright smiles on their face, but then they looked behind their father. Daddy, who's the crazy family behind you? Yuki said as Kimba walked into the house with his sons still hugging him. They are our guests until the Chunin exams are done, he said. Then both got off their father and showed some manners and bowed. Welcome to our home. We hope you'll enjoy your stay, they said in unison with smiles. Everyone enters the home one at a time, leaving Naruto last to come into the house and holding Temari's hand, but then Yuma looks puzzled the moment he lays eyes on Naruto. Then he ran to the kitchen entrance. Mommy, come see this young man who looks like you but with green eyes, he said, but they all heard a clanking sound coming from the kitchen. What did you say? Kushina asked and looked a little worried, but then Yuma spoke again and looked puzzled about his mother's reaction. I said this young man looked like you but with green eyes, he repeated. Then Kushina ran out of the kitchen and stopped at the doorway, and for the first time in her 7 years of being separated, she finally locked eyes with Naruto for the first time. Tears started to stream down her eyes, and small sobs covered her mouth. Kushina slowly came up to Naruto while everyone watched to see what would happen. Next, Kushina got closer and gently cupped Naruto's cheek to see if he was in front of her. She landed on her knees and hugged Naruto dearly. Naruto, she said with sadness and regret. Sobbing uncontrollably, Kushina continued to hug her long-lost son. Oh, Naruto, I thought I'd never see you again, she said, then she leaned away, getting a good look at him. My, have you grown? She said, but Naruto was a little puzzled and confused. Mom. Were you never mad at me? He asked, wanting to know. No, silly, I was never mad at you from the start. She started, then she continued, you were right. I was only doing what a mother should be doing. But I swear, Naruto, I never knew about their intentions. I love you too much, son. She finished speaking, then Naruto hugged his mother. I still love you, Mom. Even though I'm with my new family, I still love you. Naruto said as he felt Kushina's arms around his back and rubbed his back. Then Kushina felt her sleeve being tugged and looked at her twins. Mommy, who is he? Yuki asked as Yuma looked at the stranger. This your older brother, Naruto. She said as Yuki looked at Naruto. Then they both looked at their mother, but suddenly, both twins burst out in excitement. Yay! They then hugged Naruto. We finally got you. Meet you, big brother. Yuma said as Yuki looked up at Naruto. Mommy told us about you, big brother, he said as Naruto smiled happily and ran his hands through their hair. Naruto looked at his real mother. So, should I even ask about them? Naruto said, but Kushina shook her head with a smile. You don't need to worry about them. Your former father and I are now divorced, and Menma is no longer my son, she said as she lifted from her knees and hugged Kimba with a big smile. Then I met this lovable shinobi. Now he's your stepfather, Kushina explained. Then she showed a sad face, and Kimba rubbed her back. But when I learned you got adopted, I was happy. I was happy you found new love, Naruto. But I don't know who you will stay with after the Chunin exams. New tears are streaming down her face. But whatever choice you make, just know Korora, and I will just be happy about it. She finished talking, waiting to hear what Naruto would say. Naruto held Temari's hand and looked at Kushina. Mom, my choice doesn't matter. You are my family now. I wouldn't want that to change. I still love you, Mom. I do deeply, but my place is with Temari and her family, he explained, then he spoke again. After the Chunin exams, I will make an exception to come and visit you. He finished with a smile. Then he went over and hugged his mother, and Kushina hugged back. Accepting what Naruto wanted, Kushina spent all day sorting out one of the spare rooms and turning it to Naruto's liking. She even put in a double bed in case Naruto returned to Konoha with Temari. When she was done, she returned to the living room and spent time with her extended family while Rasa was at the Hokage Tower talking to Minato about the Chunin exams. Just as Kushina was coming back down the stairs, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, she was surprised. "Oh, Mom. What brings you over for a visit?" Kushina asked her adoptive mother, Tsunade. "What? Can't I visit my favorite daughter?" Tsunade started, then she crossed her arms and looked smug. "Are you hiding something from me, Kushina?" she asked, but Kushina shook her head. "I have a surprise for you. Now close your eyes," Kushina said, and Tsunade sighed playfully and covered her eyes. Kushina then took Tsunade's hand and led her to the living room, where everyone else noticed and looked puzzled. Kushina waved her hand for Naruto to come over, and as he did, he was a little puzzled as he stood next to his mother. Then Kushina looked at Tsunade. "Alright, your surprise is right before you," she said as she guided Tsunade's hand and felt Naruto's head. Tsunade moved her hand around Naruto's hair. "Feels soft. A mix of spiky and mossy." She started. She moved her hand from Naruto's hair to his face. "Most definitely a person," she said once more, her hand touching Naruto's face and making him chuckle. In contrast, the others at the family table tried to hold back their laughter. Then Tsunade took another feel. "This person's face doesn't have any baby fat, so whoever this person must be is working out very well and looked after," she said, making Kurora blushed and smiling at the part of Naruto being looked after well. Then Temari smirked for being the one that made Naruto work out. Tsunade felt Naruto's cheeks. That's odd, and this person has whiskers." Tsunade started, but she kept rubbing his cheeks, making Naruto purr. "That is so cute," she said. Then she moved her hand from Naruto's cheek to his neck, but she felt a thin chain. "Oh, now, what could this be?" she started. She followed the chain down, and she felt the end of the necklace, a crystal gem, but the moment she felt the crystal gem and the length and shape of it, she started to have tears streaming down her face with her arms still covering her eyes. "Kushina," she said, but could hardly come out with the words. "Yes, mother," Kushina asked, but she knew what Tsunade would ask. This person," she started, and she swallowed her throat. "Does this person have red hair, green eyes?" She paused for a moment, then she smiled. "And is he smiling like an idiot?" she said, finally finishing her question. "Why yes, he is, mother," she said as Tsunade started trembling, removing her arm from her eyes and looking at the young boy she hadn't seen in so long. "Hey, Granny," Naruto said, and then Tsunade pulled him in for a hug. "My little Naruto," she said as Naruto wrapped his arms around her neck and nuzzled her. "It's about time you came back, brat. But it's good to know you have a better life than here," she said, and then Naruto leaned back. "It's great to see you too." Naruto started, and then he showed a puzzling look. "How did you and Mom know how I've been doing?" he asked, looking very puzzled. "Kurora was kind enough to keep us up to date about how well you've been, Naruto." Kushina started, then she began to explain. "Your mother and father were here in Konoha one time, and I bumped into them. We chatted like old times, then when I explained I missed Naruto, they told me they have you and adopted you," she said. Then she kneels to her son's eye level. "I even explained what happened after I learned you ran away, but I am grateful they looked after you. I gave them my blessing to keep you as their son until they felt it was time to tell you about us, Naruto," she said as she got off her knee and stood up again. "Now let's all eat and chat, and tomorrow will be the Chunin exams, so please do your best, everyone," Kushina said as the adults nodded and the kids yelled out of excitement as the evening went on and the night has arrived. Sakura, Sora, Sasuke, and Tsunade left to return home, but Tsunade couldn't help but notice their new student with them. Kase looked familiar to her, but she was not too sure yet. While everyone else went to bed, Naruto stayed in the living room, puzzling about something, and Kimba, Kushina, Kurora, and Rasa noticed this. Kimba faced the others. "Go to bed. I'll see what's wrong with him," he said as the trio nodded and went upstairs. Kimba smiled, then he turned around to head for the living room and sat next to Naruto. "Okay, what's on your mind, Naruto? I'm all ears," he said as he waited for Naruto to respond. "Well, it's a little too much. I have two families, and to tell you the truth, I don't know what one to stay with." Naruto started, then he inhaled, then outhaled. I know what I said to mom. But I feel like I'm not sure where I belong, he said as Kimba listened carefully. Then he noticed Temari was peeking around the corner. Kimba looked back at Naruto. I understand your feelings, but you should stick with what you promised. Kimba started as Naruto looked at his stepfather. I know I'm only your stepfather Naruto, but I do believe if you to listen to your heart, it will lead you the way. He said. Then Temari slowly came towards them, not making a sound as she comes forward. Now just clear your mind Naruto. Just inhale and outhale a couple of times, close your eyes. Listen to what your heart is saying, then tell me just one family member, and whoever you said is the family you want to be with. He said as Naruto did as he was advised as he inhales and outhale. While doing that, Temari was inches behind Naruto, curious of his words, but she has a worried expression and both her fits close to her heart. Kimba looked at Temari and put his finger at his lips to suggest her not to say a word. He then looked back at Naruto. Are you relaxed Naruto and calm? He started and asked. Then Naruto nodded his head. Yes, he said. Then Kimba spoke once more. Alright, for this part, you need to calm your mind and focus who you have in your head, and tell me who is in your mind and could be anyone in our families Naruto. He said, helping Naruto with his confused choice. Naruto's mind is clear. He takes a deep breath out, and then an image slowly appears in his mind. I see a figure. It's a she. He started as he continued to see the image clearer. She has a cute smile. A sandy blonde color. 4-bun hairstyle. He paused for a minute. That's good, Naruto, just don't force the image into your head, just let it come to you, Kimba said as he remained silent for the time being. While Naruto was saying all of this, Temari remained quiet, and her heart was racing so fast at Naruto's proper confession. Now say the final detail, Naruto, what are her eyes? Kimba said as he slowly got up from the couch and looked at Temari with a soft smile and nod. Then he looked at Naruto once more. She has. He paused for a moment. She has beautiful teal eyes, he said, and with Naruto's description finished he softly said one name, Temari. He said. Then Kimba left them alone. Don't you two stay up all night, he said as he went upstairs and leaving Naruto with Temari. Naruto's eyes opened widely and he sharply got up from the couch and looked behind him, seeing Temari standing there with a tear running down her left cheek. Naruto, she softly says. Then Naruto came up to her and kissed her lips. As this sudden act it has made Temari surprised as her eyes are widened slightly, but she slowly melts into the kiss and wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck, and Naruto wrapped his arms around Temari's lower back as they continued to kiss each other more passionately. After a few minutes they both finally break apart from each other's lips and took some breath as they pant a little. Naruto, does this mean you're staying with us? She asked, but worried at the same time. But Naruto nodded. Yes. I love my real family dearly, but I was shown real kindness, real care, and real love. He started. Then he kissed Temari's cheek. And I am mostly staying for the one I want to be with. The one I want to settle down with one day, he said as his words made Temari's heart beat fast. Oh Naruto, I love you, you big knucklehead, she said and giggled as Naruto smiled. He held Temari's hand. Let's get to bed Temari, he said as Temari nodded, and the two went to bed together. The next morning, with everyone downstairs eating breakfast, Kurora is a little worried that both Naruto and Temari aren't down for breakfast, but Kushina is a little annoyed that they're going to be late. Those two need to get up or I wear to Kami. I will march up there myself, Kushina said as he had a piece of her clothing in her mouth and trying her best not to get mad so much, while Kurora was doing the same thing but thinking of a different reason. Those two better not have slept in the same bed together, she said as their anger and their controlled frustration is scaring everyone else. Just then there's a knock at the front door. Kushina got up and went over to it, and when she opened it, it was Team 7. Good morning, Kushina-sensei, Sakura greeted. Is everyone ready yet? She asked, but they all noticed a sad and annoyed expression. No Sakura, only Naruto and Temari haven't come down yet and I was just about to check on them, she said as she led Team 7 in, but Kakashi wasn't with them. Sakura, could you please go up and check on them? She asked, which Sakura smiled and nodded. Sure thing, I'll be right down, she said as she took her sandals off before entering, then went upstairs. Sasuke, Sora, where is Kakashi? She asked, only for the two boys to look at each other then back up to her. Do you need to ask us that? Sora said with his arms crossed and looked annoyed. He's doing what he always does, running late because of those dumb books of his. Sasuke said as he and Sora took off their sandals and went into the dining room. They sat with the others to chat. Sakura made her way upstairs and looked around the rooms, just peeking in to see what room they both are in, and lucky for her it's always the third time as she's seen them both cuddling each other in the same bed, making her showing a devilish smirk on her face. Oh, this is going to be fun. She giggled, then she walked right into the room, making less noise as she stopped just a couple of inches away from the bed as she thinks of a way just to mess with them. Sakura returned to the door, opened it wide, and stood across from it with her plan set. She said in a twist of sweetness and sarcasm. She made her voice loud and clear, "Oh dear. I seem to have walked in on Naruto and Temari doing something they shouldn't do," she said, snickering, and suddenly, they felt the floor shake. She stepped away from the door, and then Kushina and Kurora came right at the door and got stuck together. "Naruto, Temari, stop doing what you're both doing," they both said in unison, scaring the two lovebirds and waking them from the side of the horror of both mothers being pissed and bits of their clothing in their mouths. Naruto and Temari both sharply woke up and sat up from their bed. Still, Naruto lifted their covers and covered Temari's body even though she wore a nightdress. "Mom, Mother, what's going on?" Naruto asked as he looked too panicky and worried for his and Temari's safety from their rage. "Wait, were you two just sleeping?" Kushina asked and looked puzzled as both kids nodded sharply. Then Kurora looked at Sakura with an annoyed expression and her arms crossed. "Sakura, don't scare us like that," she said as Sakura had one hand behind her and her other hand rubbing the back of her head and laughing sheepishly. "I'm sorry, but it was too much to pass up," she started, then continued. "I am sorry, Kushina-sensei, Lady Kurora, but it did wake them up," she said as they both let Sakura pass to leave the room. Kushina followed, leaving Kurora with Naruto and Temari. Their mother sighed. "Okay, I won't go off my rocker, but please explain to me why you slept in the same bed," she asked, wanting to know why they made this bold move early for them. Before Naruto explained about last night, Temari stayed behind Naruto and rested her head on his back, bracing herself in case their mother went off her rocker. Naruto started explaining that Kimba helped him with his choice of who to stay with and explained that he knew what he said yesterday, but he felt a little torn. Kurora had her arms crossed and had a straight face just listening to her son's story. Naruto explained that he had to clear his mind and focus who to imagine in his two families, and the result was Temari making Naruto's choice very clear, and that he is staying with his Suna family but will be keeping his promise to visit once a while to his real mother here in Konoha. After explaining, Kurora sighed and rubbed the side of her head. "Alright. I guess I'll allow this. Just keep your promise and promise me you won't do anything to upset me." She pauses for a moment, then looked at Temari, who just peeked her head from the side of Naruto. "That goes double for you, young lady," she said, making Temari flinched and nodded repeatedly. Kurora then smiled at her kids. "Alright. Now please get dressed and come down for breakfast, it's almost time, okay?" she said as Naruto and Temari nodded as they get up and were getting ready as Kurora left them alone to get changed, but Naruto picked up his clean clothes and went to the bathroom to get changed to give Temari some space to get change in peace, but she pouted, not wanting Naruto to leave but respected what he's doing. But a few minutes later the two are full dressed and headed downstairs holding hands as they went over to the family table and had some long chats and eating breakfast together. Meanwhile, in Tsunade's office at the hospital, she had just received some new details about cases as she had some late-night digging after she learned that Lord Kazekage was trying to find out about K's, but what she found for them shocked to her core as she froze stiff at her desk looking at the DNA results. Half an hour later, everyone was ready to leave except for Kushina and Kimba, who wanted to do a few things before leaving. Even Rasa stayed behind to help while Kurora took both teams to the academy. Kakashi finally arrived but gave a dumb excuse for being late, but that was thrown out of the window when he was still scared by Kushina. Once the group got what they needed, they headed to the academy to get through the written exams. Still, after a few minutes with the groups just left, Tsunade came to Kimba and Kushina's home as if she had just heard about a fire going off. Shizune was by her side holding information about K's, and then Tsunade burst through the door, worrying the trio. "K's," Tsunade started, and then she looked around the ground floor. "K's," she yelled, then she came up to Rasa. "Where's K's? I need to find him," she said with a worried tone. "Why? What's the hurry?" he asked, not wanting to know what Tsunade could do if she didn't get the needed answers. Suddenly, Kimba and Kushina grabbed each arm of Tsunade. "Mom, please calm down. Kushina said, and then Kimba spoke up. Tsunade, what's going on? What's the rush? He asked, wanting to know what she was all worked up about. Tell me, how did Kase come into your care in Suna? Tsunade asked as she slowly calmed down, and Kushina and Kimba slowly let go of her. One of my weekly patrols found him at our borders. He said he escaped from Orochimaru. He said, hoping it was the answer she was looking for. Orochimaru, Tsunade said with much venom in her voice, making the others worry. What does this mean, Tsunade? Kimba asked, but then Shizune spoke up. Kase is Tsunade's son. Her words shocked the others about Kase's identity. So where is he? Tsunade asked as she crossed her arms to see where her son was. He and the others just left a few minutes ago for the Chunin exams, Rasa said. As Tsunade was about to leave to find him, Kushina grabbed her mother's shoulder. Mom, what are you going to do? She asked, wanting to know her mother's plans. I'm going to tell Kase who and what he is. Then it's his choice what to do. She said as she and Shizune left to heave for the academy. Then Rasa, Kimba, and Kushina followed behind, wanting to see how the Chunin exams go and see what Tsunade would do. At the academy, everyone was bored out of their minds from Lord Fourth's speech. Then once it was done, the written exams could now start up, and within a few seconds there has been already a few students who have been caught and escorted out while the rest do their best to try and not get caught. Still, after an hour of the test, many passed, while a good hand failed the first test. Half an hour before the written exams finished, Tsunade, Shizune, Rasa, Kimba, and Kushina arrived in the viewing room to see how everyone was doing. Tsunade stood next to Kurora. Kurora, what seat is Kase sitting in? She asked as she scanned the room for him. Then Kurora pointed to the second last row in front of them. Well, he's right there. He's doing well, not getting caught, she said as Tsunade crossed her arms and watched over Kase. The students who had passed the written exams followed Anko towards one of many entrances of the Forest of Death, but once there, an Anbu known as Bear appeared. He whispered something in Anko's ear. She nodded in agreement, and Bear disappeared. Anko looked at everyone once more. Alright, brats, listen up. She started, then began to explain how the Forest of Death trail works. About the scrolls, a team needs 2 scrolls, an Earth and Heaven scroll, and they must reach the center of the forest within 5 days from now. Still, if they open their scroll too early, they are out. If they are found injured, they are also out. Still, if they are found dead, they will be sent back to their families. Does everybody have that? I ain't repeating myself, she said as everyone's heads nodded rapidly. Good, now get your butts to the other entrance points. She started as she inhaled, then outhale. Now, she yelled as everyone bolted to their assigned gates. Still, she halted Team Kurora and Team 7, you lot are staying at this gate, and someone is coming to talk to one of you. Anko said as she walked off to the forest center and left both teams where they were. What do you think is going to happen? Sakura said as some looked worried, hoping none wouldn't be kicked out. Some just shrugged at Sakura's question while waiting to see what was happening. Soon enough, Tsunade arrived with Shizune, but the group seemed to be a little scared of Tsunade's stern look on her face. Then she stopped in front of the group, her arms crossed. Kase, step forward, please, she asked. Then he does so, and without a doubt, just looking at Kase, Tsunade sees the spitting image of herself within, even wearing the same clothes she used to wear when Tsunade was his age, and tears start to stream down her face. Lady Tsunade, are you alright? Tamari asked, but Tsunade shook her head. No, I'm looking at my son, she said, shocking everyone, but mostly, Kase was appalled as he struggled to find the words to answer. I'm what? Kase said, still shocked and shaken by what he'd just been told. Shizune approached Kase and showed him his DNA with Tsunade's in another DNA match. Kase took the papers and took a minute to look through them, then looked back up at Tsunade. The others came up around Kase, and then Naruto took the DNA papers out of Kase's hands so the others could look at them for their own eyes. So, who's my father? Kase asked, looking very confused about the situation. He didn't know what to make of this, but Tsunade said, Your father was Hachi Uzumaki. Tsunade said, but this news shocked Naruto and Kase. There's other Uzumaki other than me, my siblings, and my mother? Naruto asked as Tsunade nodded, but when she was about to speak up, Kase spoke up first. What happened between you and Dad? He asked, but Tsunade had a sad expression. He He passed away. He sacrificed himself to save his village. She started, then she continued after her pause. He was the second man I ever loved. But after my first lover Dan and Hachi, I had enough of being with men. She said, then she looked at her son and kneeled to his level. I swear to you Kase, I never meant for you to be in Orochimaru's hands. She said as she wanted to wait and see what her son will do. Can you tell me everything once we pass this exam? Kase asked as he looked up at his mother with tears in his eyes. Tsunade wiped them away. I'll see you when you all come back, she said. Then she kissed her son's forehead and left with Shizune to return to the village, leaving the group to do their exams. A day later, both Team 7 and Team Kurora made it to the tower first, but they were waiting to see what other teams would make it to the tower. Sakura was sitting next to Gaara and resting her head on Gaara's lap, making Temari a bit overprotective of her brother, while Naruto was next to Temari and Naruto has his head resting on Temari's shoulder, napping, which Temari doesn't mind. Kase is sitting by himself still taking in what he's been told, while Sasuke and Sora kept a lookout seeing if anyone else shows up to the tower, while Kankuro is busy mess around with his puppet keeping them company as Kurora after they got to the tower and opened their scrolls. Kakashi was there but he went away to read his book. Again. Kurora went over to Kase to see if he needs anything or want company. Kase, are you doing alright? She started, then she kneeled to his level. I know it is a lot to take in about yesterday, but would you please come with me and have something to eat? She said. Then Kase slowly extended his hand out, then Kurora took it and got Kase to stand up and had him to follow her over to the table, and she gave Kase something to eat out of their supplies they have with them. 2 hours later another team have arrived who were slightly beaten and tired for trying to keep their 2 scrolls and fighting their way to the tower. Hey, we got a leaf team that needs help, Sora said as he and Sasuke leapt into action while the others were busy setting up the tower like a medical base. Kase stood up and went to help Sasuke and Sora with the new team that arrived. Kase jumped down from the tower using a nearby tree to soft his landing, then he landed on the ground to help Sasuke and Sora. Once he got to the others, it was Team 8 who needed medical attention. Kase took Hinata in his arms and hurried back to the tower as she seems to be the worst one to be in a horrible state, while Sasuke and Sora are dealing with Kimba, Akamaru, and Shino. Inside of the tower Kurora, Sakura, and Temari are ready to help Team 8, while Naruto and Kankuro are on standby with Sasuke and Sora if the girls needed help, while Kase looked after Hinata as she seemed to be out cold for a while, but he looked after her injuries and making sure she's comfortable as possible. A few hours later, after Team 8 had been patched up and looked after, Hinata slowly awakened from her slumber, and the first thing she saw was Kase's kind, caring, and worried face as his sad expression changed to a happy one. Oh, thank Kami, you're alright, he said, but Hinata's face quickly brightened up like a stoplight and struggling to find the words. Oh, hello. She started, then she slowly sat up with Kase's help. Who are you? She then looked around. And how did I get here? She said and asked. Your team brought you here and we looked after you. You're the 3rd time to appear at the tower, he said, reassuring Hinata that she and her team are very safe. Also, I'm Kase, he said and introduced himself to Hinata. Hinata looked at Kase again and showed a soft smile. I'm Hinata Hyuga, she said with her soft tone and caring voice. Then Kurora came up to them and the two looked up at her. Hey, how are you feeling? She asked as she kneels to their level and double check on Hinata. I feel okay, but shaking, Hinata said as Kurora smiled and nodded. I'm glad of that. Your teammate Kiba told me what happened. She started but noticed Hinata's blushing face, then noticed the way she's being held by Kase, but Hinata seems to like the way she's being held, leaving a soft smile on Kurora's face. If you need anything, Hinata, just call on me or Kase here, she said as she got up. Then she went on to double check with the others while Hinata is left with Kase and the two blush slightly. Oh here, let me get you against a wall, he said as she picked her up bridal style and walked over to a wall to rest. Hinata rest, leaving a small smile on her face. Thank you so much, Kase, she said as she reached out and gently gripped onto Kase's shirt, leaving Kase with a puzzled expression. Could you please, stay with me? She asked in her gentle voice. By thinking for a minute, Kase sat down next to her to keep Hinata company. Sure, I'll stay with you, he said as Hinata rested her head on his shoulder. Then she closed her eyes to rest. Then Kase pulled over a pillow for her back and a blanket that he placed over her. 3 days later, more teams were slowly arriving at the tower each day, with some who had failed and were out, while others were somehow injured and others were found dead. Those with team members dead were going to be sent back to their respective villages, but they were treated at the tower before they were going back home. But hearing troubles of teams being randomly attacked left Karora puzzled and worried, and mostly worried for her children, as she hopes there isn't going to be any trouble. With the Forest of Death stage all done, the remaining teams gets to move forward to the final part of the Chunin exams. But after everything that has happened to everyone, the fourth Hokage has given everyone a week to recover until the final stage, but to others it will be an excellent time to train and relax to do what they want to do, while Team 7 and Team Karora returned to the Uchiha compound and do as they pleased. During the 5 days both teams had a good time getting to know each other better. Kase and Hinata spent a lot of time together learning about each other, but Kase is unsure to even face Tsunade just yet, while Sakura is having fun with her time being with Gaara. While Naruto had turned 13 and kept his promise long enough that he and Temari are now a couple, while Karora and Kushina keep themselves from being mad if Naruto and Temari go any further, but Karora would need to keep an eye on Gaara too, since he is happy to be with Sakura and Karora allowed her son to start dating. While others are spending time with family or training to make themselves more robust for the Chunin exams finals. 2 days before the Chunin exams finals. You can't keep ignoring her forever, Kase. You have to go and see her, Hinata said as she looked down at Kase, who was resting his head on her lap while Hinata was playing with his hair. I know him. I don't know how to approach her, Kase said as he felt terrible for not seeing Tsunade after the Forest of Death. Kase turned his head, looking up at Hinata. Do you think I should go and see her, Hinata? Kase asked as he looked worried and nervous about going through with it. Hinata softly smiled at Kase. Kase, I'm not forcing you, but you should go and see her, she said as she hunched down and kissed Kase's forehead, making him blush as Hinata leaned back up against the tree. I'll go with you, Kase. Though will you call her mother? She asked curiously. Well, he started trying to think what to say, then he looked up at Hinata once more. I'd say not yet. I want to hear what her story for leaving me, he said as Hinata nodded in agreement. That's a good reason, she started, gently gripping his head and bringing him up to her eye level. Just remember to keep a calm and clear head and listen to what she has to say, okay? She said sternly, then to a gentle tone in her voice, making Kase more scared of her than Tsunade. Okay, Hinata, he said as he slowly gets up, then he helps up Hinata. Still, she noticed a change in Kase's expression. What is it, Kase? She asked, looking slightly worried for him. I have no clue where she lives, he said as he rubbed the back of his head and laughed sheepishly, leaving Hinata to giggle at him. Oh, Kase, what will I do with you? Hinata said and giggled a little more, making Kase giggle too. Maybe Lady Kushina would know? She is, after all, Tsunade's daughter, she suggested as Kase nodded, and they both headed to the Uchiha compound. Kase knocked on Kushina's home. While waiting for an answer, Hinata laced her arms around Kase's stomach and leaned her head on his back, but after a minute, Kushina opened the door and yawned. Yes, who is it? She started, then looked down and saw Kase and Hinata. Oh, Kage, Hinata, what brings you two here? She asked, looking a bit puzzled. We're sorry to wake you, Kushina-sensei, but do you know where Lady Tsunade lives? Kase asked while Hinata was too busy nuzzling into his back, making him blush and trying not to react too much. Kushina frowned a little but understood Kase's situation. You haven't made your mind up to call her mom yet, have you? She asked, and Kase simply shook his head. It's alright, I know you won't be forced to call her what you want, but just remember, if you do, you're my little brother, Kushina said. Then she giggled as Kase smiled slightly but remembered another question. How come you don't look like Tsunade anyway? He asked, not wanting to sound rude, but Kushina gently petted his head and gave him an honest answer. She adopted me, that's why I couldn't have asked for a better mother, she started, then pointed to the house just across from where they were standing. That's where our mother lives. She decided to move here ever since I started living in the Uchiha district and when I married Kimba. Kushina said, with a friendly smile. Thank you, Lady Kushina. Sis. Kase is babbling at points, making Hinata and Kushina giggle at him. It's alright, Kase, make your choice later, Kushina said as Kase blushed and nodded. Then he and Hinata went over to Tsunade's house. Kase knocked on the door, and Hinata hugged Kase's back as they waited for the door to be answered. Standing outside of Tsunade's home in the Uchiha district, Hinata and Kase waited a minute until someone finally answered the door, but it wasn't Tsunade who answered it. Tenten had asked to be her student and is training under her, along with Shizune. Yes, can I help you too? Tenten asked as she looked a little puzzled. Then, she finally noticed Hinata hugging Kase at his back. Oh, Hinata, I honestly didn't notice you for a second. Tenten started and then looked at Kase. I hope you're looking after her well, but what can I do for you too? Tenten said as she crossed her arms and looked at them both, waiting for an answer. Kase finally spoke. Is Lady Tsunade in? I want to talk to her? Kase asked. Then Hinata poked her head out of Kase's right side. Sure, she's in, but let me ask if you're allowed in first, Tenten said as she went into the living room and informed Tsunade and Shizune that Kase and Hinata were here to see her. Shizune approached the door and offered Kase and Hinata to come inside. Please come in, you two. I'll go get tea made, Shizune said as the trio entered the living room. Shizune continued to the kitchen while Kase and Hinata stood behind one of the couches. Kase wasn't sure whether to sit down or make eye contact with his mother, but Tenten sensed some tension from Kase, and she took Hinata with her to the kitchen so both Kase and Tsunade would have some one-on-one chat time. After silence, Kase finally said, So, could you tell me why you gave me up? Kase asked, unsure what to ask other than why he was never in her life. Kase, please sit down, and I'll tell you. Tsunade said as she still couldn't believe it after all those years that she was looking at her only son again. Kase sat down on the couch across from Tsunade. Kase was still uncomfortable being near her, yet Tsunade frowned slightly but changed it to a soft smile again. Well, truth be told, Kase, I originally didn't want to give you up. Tsunade started as Kase listened carefully and kept an open mind to her reason. I give you up because if anyone were to find out you were my son, the council would try and put you on the Clan Restoration Act. Tsunade stated, but Kase was a little puzzled and spoke up. What does that act do? He asked, being a little curious about it. It makes the council have power and forces the last member of a known clan into forceful marriage, and you're supposed to pick as many girls or women as you want just to restart a clan. Tsunade explained and noticed her son had a pale face once he heard what it meant. Heck no, they can shove that up there. Kase stopped talking once Tsunade raised her hand. In this house, young man, we don't use nasty words. She said, and Kase had a sweat drop at the back of his head. Sorry. I don't want them near me with that. He started just as Tsunade had placed her hand back on her lap and hearing what her son has to say. I got a girl, and her name is Hinata. I wouldn't want another girl near me, he said while in the kitchen. Hinata, Tenten, and Shizune hear this, and Tenten and Shizune can't help but giggle at his words. Hinata blushes like the sunset. As long I'm around, and as long Shizune, Kushina and Tenten are around, that act will not go near you, son, Tsunade said, reassuring Kase that he won't be alone. Just then, Hinata returned and sat on Kase's lap, leaving Tsunade puzzled and Kase blushing at this sudden act. Hinata? Kase said. Then Hinata looked up at Kase with a severe expression. That act is not going anywhere near you. And I'll be sure of it because they'll need to go through me first. Hinata said as she leaned on Kase, resting her head on his chest. Tenten and Shizune giggled as they returned from the kitchen with some snacks and green tea. Then Tsunade spoke to Hinata. Hinata, as much as I agree with you, but, get in line. I'm the first person those council bastards go through first. Tsunade said, but she changed her serious expression to puzzled once she heard Kase chuckling. No swearing, he said, making the others giggle. Tsunade blushed a little, but she also couldn't help but giggle after Kase told her of her own rule, but the point is Kase. I never wanted to give up, so I left you in Kirigakure, hoping you had a good life. Tsunade started but paused for a minute, thinking about what happened that day, and then she continued. But only a few weeks after I left you in Kirigakure's orphanage, I got word that you and other children were stolen from the orphanage. She paused once more, and tears slowly streamed down her face. It broke my heart knowing you were stolen. Shizune and I came as quickly as possible to find you and the other children, she stated but paused once more to wipe the tears away from her face. It took us a year to find you, but we couldn't find anything about you or the other children. You and the others were just gone, she said and finished explaining what happened that day. Tenten and Hinata were heartbroken and shocked at what they learned, while Shizune couldn't help but draw some tears after she, too, had failed to find any of the stolen children. Kase had a tear stream from his right eye after hearing that his mother was trying to find him but was heartbroken that he was taken away and did not have the life his mother wanted. Lady Tsunade. Kase softly spoke and gained everyone's attention. I'm ready to get to know you and our family better, Kase said as Tsunade was shocked but proud of her son's words. Sure, Kase, whatever you want. Tsunade noted that they spent hours knowing each other, learning each other's likes and dislikes, clouding hobbies and their dreams, making Kase happy to know more about his family, and finally learning where he belongs. 2 days later, it was time for the preliminaries where the final Genin shinobi would take part and see who would come out on top and become Chunin. But first, everything had to either stand or sit through Minato's dumb speeches that dragged on for too long. After what seems like a day, Minato was done with the speech and hoping that everyone would show sportsmanship and don't try to kill each other. He would then sat next to Lord Third, who is still kicking around and sitting with Rasa for representing Suna. But he was disappointed with Minato and Menma's actions towards their own family. But it was now time for the first round to start with Sasuke Uchiha against Yoroi Akato. But after several minutes of the fight, Sasuke had been proving the victor of the first match, and once the match was finished, Kakashi took Sasuke with him to do some special training and will be back within a month. Next match was Zaku Abumi against Shino Aburame, with the match taking a bit longer than Sasuke's match. Shino came out as the winner, sitting with the Uchiha clan, and next up is Kankuro against Masumi Tsurugi. But before Kankuro could go to the arena, Kurora tapped his shoulder, then he looked back. Try your best, son. Win or lose, just know I'm proud of you, she said as Kankuro has a smile on his face. Then he looked at his family on his right, and sitting next to him is Gaara with Sakura on his lap and his arms are laced around her stomach, and the two looked at Kankuro. You don't hear this much from me, Kankuro, but good luck, he said. Then Sakura spoke up. As much as I am still part of Konoha, I'm still telling you good luck, she said reassuringly. She leaned back more onto Gaara, and then Kankuro looked at Kase, who was sitting beside Gaara even. Kase had his girlfriend Hinata on his lap doing a similar thing. Only Kase had his chin resting on Hinata's left shoulder as they both looked at Kankuro. I'm the same as Sakura, but good luck, Kankuro, Hinata said, reassuringly smiling. Also, Kase spoke, make sure you win this. If you don't, you're buying us all dinner tonight, Kase said as he couldn't help but laugh at Kankuro's reaction. He felt like his spirit was leaving his body. Kankuro then leaned forward a bit to see Naruto and Temari. Everyone else looked at the two, and they couldn't help. Still, all start to snicker, then turned into laughter from Kurora, Kimba, Kushina, Tsunade, Shizune, Kankuro, Sakura, Gaara, Hinata, Yuki and Yuma, and the Uchiha clan, seeing Naruto sitting on Temari's lap. She was petting his head while Naruto sulked, crossed his arms, and finally pouted, but Temari regretted nothing for making her brother-turned-boyfriend sit on her lap. Still, they both looked at Kankuro once everyone had settled down. Kankuro thanked his family and new friends as he left the stands to take his turn to fight. As he left, Naruto turned his head to Sora, sitting beside him, and Temari said, "Hey Sora, I've been meaning to ask." Naruto said, getting Sora's attention as he looked at him. Even Temari was a little curious about Naruto's question. "How come you look like Kimba-sensei?" he asked as he and Temari waited for him to answer. "Oh, I'm his son. I've never introduced myself because I was shy, and my dad and I don't talk much, so we avoid each other a little, and I'm not around much because of my time with Team 7. Sora started and explained, then he continued, "But, we are slowly talking again, and I was angry at Dad for being remarried. But I understand his happiness now, and I have got to know Kushina. Well, I meant Mom a bit better over the years, too." Sora said as Naruto smiled and extended his fist to Sora, but Sora was confused. He looked at Naruto's fist and then back at Naruto. "Welcome to the family then," he said brightly. Sora fist bumps Naruto's fist. "Thanks, big brother," Sora said, smiling back at Naruto. Everyone paid attention to Kankuro's match against Masumi Tsurugi, but after much struggle against Masumi, Kankuro came out as the winner of the game and returned to his family. Then, it was Sakura's turn against Ino. Sakura got up from Gaara's lap and turned around to face him. "Got any prep talk for me, Gaara?" Sakura said as she wanted to hear some nice words from Gaara, but what he did was he stood up and uncrossed his arms even though the others were curious. Just as Kankuro came back to the stands, "No prep talk, just a boost." he said as everyone was puzzled while Sakura cocked a brow until Gaara gently grabbed the collar of Sakura's kipao dress, then he pulled her close. He kissed Sakura's lips, leaving everyone gasping. At the same time, Karora had her fists clenched and a bit of her clothing in her mouth, looking mad at the scene before her. Gaara parted from Sakura's lips, leaving her a bit drunk and blushing. "Holy Kami!" Sakura yelled, and then she bolted for the arena. Gaara sat back down, his arms crossed, leaving his family speechless, while his mother was a little overprotective, with the piece of her clothing still in her mouth. Karora muttered. "Gaara, talk to me first next time, mister," she said, leaving her family flinching at her small rage. Even Gaara was now scared, and Gaara nodded at his mother's words on the other side of the arena. Rasa couldn't help but laugh, but being proud of his family is all growing up. Sakura and Ino's match started, and with Sakura's new training with Gaara and his family, she'll be taking it more seriously than her original counterpart. Ino had to take this match seriously, but Ino ended up losing her match and was being mopey about it. But Sakura approached her best friend and extended her hand, showing good sportsmanship and trust. "Hey, great match, Ino. I enjoyed every minute of it," Sakura said, reassuringly smiling on her lips as Ino was taking back a little, but she accepted Sakura's help and took her hand. The crowd cheered for Sakura and Ino for showing good sportsmanship, and they parted ways to their sides of the arena. The next match was now Tamari against Tenten. The two looked at each other from the other ends of the arena and smirked, knowing they were training hard as they did not know or adequately interact. They both have a rivalry and will see who will be better than each other. Naruto got off Temari's lap and turned to face her. "Oh Tima, you win. I buy us dinner tonight. Just don't kill her. I don't want Granny chewing you out." As Tamari got up and put her fan on her shoulder, Naruto said, "Don't worry, I will win, and you better treat me tonight." Tamari said as she smirked at Naruto, but just as she was about to walk away, Naruto grabbed the collar of her shirt, pulled her back to him, and kissed her lips, making Temari's eyes widen, and she melted into the kiss. Then they split from each other's lips. "Kami, best prep kiss ever," Tamari said with a smirk. Then she kissed Naruto's lips once more. Then she went off to the arena to face her opponent. Naruto sat back down and crossed his arms as he watched the battle with his family, but Naruto couldn't help but feel that both his moms look like they want to kill him right now, but he is afraid to even look back. Naruto, no victory kiss before matches. Both Karora and Kushina said as they both look like they want to knock some sense into Naruto, but Kimba slowly calms both of them down. Down at the arena, both Tamari and Tenten showed sportsmanship by fist bumping each other. Then their match starts with both girls showing off their jutsu and combat skills, with neither one of them back down, but with Tenten being Tsunade's apprentice, she is slightly more robust and has the upper hand on Tamari, but Tamari is skillful in smarts and used Tenten's strength against her as Tamari got her off guard with some fancy moves. Tamari managed to knock Tenten out for the count, making Tamari the winner of the match. Tamari showed sportsmanship and helped Tenten up. Tenten got her arm over Temari's shoulders and was grateful for the support. She supported Tenten by walking her over to her family's side of the arena, since that's where Tsunade sat while heading back. Tenten was a little confused. "Okay. Not that I'm complaining about the help, but why are you taking me over here?" Tenten asked as she looked at Tamari with a puzzling expression, not making eye contact so she could watch where she was going. Tamari said, "Well, we're closer to this side of the arena, plus I thought you want to hear what Lady Tsunade thinks of your performance." Tamari said as Tenten looked at her for a minute, then smiled softly. "Yeah, sure," she said as they both took a few minutes to climb the stairs. Naruto rushed over and gave Tamari a helping hand. "You two did fantastically, that was one of the best fights ever," Naruto said, making both girls blush from his comment, and both girls softly smiled. Soon, the trio went to sit down, and Tenten listened to what Tsunade had said. Tenten was hunched over a bit and had a worried expression, but she also wasn't making eye contact with Tsunade then. Tsunade placed her hand on Tenten's shoulder and a smile on her face as she leaned to Tenten's ear. "Well done, Tenten. More training will help you become stronger, like Kushina and my son. I'm proud of you." Tenten had a tear streaming from her left eye and a joyful smile on her lips. Then she turned around, looking at her mentor. "Thank you, Lady Tsunade," Tenten said as she turned again to watch the next match, Shikamaru Nara, against Kintsuchi. Shikamaru's fight was an excellent match, with Shikamaru coming out as the winner. The next match was Naruto Uzumaki against Kiba Inuzuka. Naruto got up from Temari's lap again, then turned and faced her. "Okay. I am enjoying myself being on your lap. But at least sit on my lap once in a while," Naruto said and chuckled then. Temari got up and smirked at her. "Naruto. Just win so we can go on a date later," Temari said bluntly, shocking Naruto that his ghost just wanted to head south. Then he snapped out of it. "Temari. Shouldn't we talk to mom first?" he said, but it was too late. Kurora and Kushina were standing right behind Temari, the devil glaring at them both, and they crossed their arms. "And when are you two going to tell us?" Kushina said as Temari was now scared and ran behind Naruto and laced her arms around his stomach. It just slipped out. "We were going to tell you after the preliminaries, I promised," Temari said as Naruto was a little scared and didn't want to speak, but at this point, he had to. "It was my idea. I asked Temari out on a date just before the preliminaries started," Naruto said, trying to defend Temari, but both mothers slowly calmed down. "Alright, just tell us next time. I know we're harsh on you both, but we're mothers. It's our job to look out for you," Kurora said, then Kushina nodded, agreeing with Kurora. "Just be careful later." "Okay," Kushina said, and both Naruto and Temari nodded. Once that was settled, Kurora and Kushina returned to their seats. Then Naruto turned to face Temari and kissed her, trying to calm her nerves down. After a minute, Naruto broke from the kiss. "Wish me luck, Haim. I'm winning this for us both," Naruto said that as Temari was a little tipsy from that kiss. She just nodded in agreement. Finally, Naruto went to the arena to face his opponent, but Temari suddenly realized something. "Wait, did he just call me Haim?" she said as she blushed so red that she was almost in the red sun. Naruto finally got down to the arena to face Kiba. With their intense match and the struggles from both sides, Naruto finally ended up winning his match. He, too, showed sportsmanship and helped Kiba and Akamaru get back on their feet and paws as they shook hands and then parted ways back to their side of the stands. Next up is Hinata Hyuga against her cousin Neji Hyuga. Hinata got off Kei's lap, then she turned around to face him, leaned close and kissed his lips, signifying that they were now a couple as Kei's face went super red. "Oh wow. Go get him, Hinata," Kei said as he was very dizzy from Hinata's sudden kiss. His reaction made Hinata giggle, and the others just awed them except Tsunade, who was now having a turn of being overprotective and had a piece of her clothing in her mouth, and her eyes were red. Kei's, Hinata, Tsunade started as they looked at her with fear, and everyone else was the same. "No dating until you're both 13, she said as the two rapidly nodded. Hinata darted away to the arena. Once both cousins face each other, Neji intends to prove himself to his clan, while Hinata will try to win this match for Kei's. Still, once the battle began, Neji became a loose cannon and hurt Hinata badly. At the same time, Hinata stands her ground against her cousin, but seeing Hinata hurt makes Kei's boil in anger. He can't do anything but watch as he stands up, approaches the edge of the stands, and grips tightly to the railing. After a long struggle, Neji won the match, and Hinata was severely hurt and struggled to get up. Neji came close to her, ready to put her lights out for good, but before the other senseis interfered, Kei's jumped from where he was standing and sucker punched Neji, knocking him to the ground. "Is that how you treat family, by almost killing them?" Kei said as he was trying not to lose his temper. Neji wanted to get up, but the battle against Hinata left him tired and unable to move. Hiyashi Hyuga and Hizashi Hyuga came down to the arena and stopped just above Neji. "Don't interfere, boy," Hiyashi said as he was going to walk over and take Hinata back with him, but Kei threw a kunai just at his feet, stopping him while Hizashi picked up his son and watched the scene before him. "Newsflash, that is not how a family member should be treated, old man," Kei said as everyone in the arena gasped. Tsunade wasn't sure what to make of the situation as she stood up and walked to the railings and stood still with her arms crossed and ready to jump in to help her only flesh and blood. Kei went over to Hinata and picked her up in his arms. "Hinata is staying with us. I don't think she should be with a family that was planning to let her die," Kei said as he turned around and walked away with Hinata, taking her to the hospital. Hiyashi was about to attack Kei but stopped and looked up at the stands, feeling Tsunade's chakra flaring up. "Attack my son, and I will make you pay," Tsunade said as this shocked everyone hearing who Kase belonged to. Even Lord 3rd and 4th were surprised by this news, but Hiyashi backed away and returned to the stands with his brother. Hanabi left stands from her clan and rushed to her sister's side while the next match was Gaara against Rock Lee. The match was surprising, to say the least, with Rock Lee being shown he's faster without his weights on him getting good hits onto Gaara, but at the end of it Gaara is the winner of his match, but with his tailed beast seals being properly fixed with his mother around he doesn't damaged Rock Lee than his original counterpart did. Rock Lee is still conscious, he would be only sent to the hospital with only a broken arm and barely to walk. Gaara, just like his family, showed sportsmanship and used his sand to help Rock Lee and taking him to the hospital to get checkout, but once the arena was cleared the next match could not begin with Dosu Kinunta against Choji Akamichi. With the match begins and being an excellent match to watch, Dosu came out as the winner of the match, and finally there's a three-way match for the preliminaries finals which includes Kase, Sora Uchiha, and Menma. Once the names were announced both Sora and Menma went to the arena where they wait 10 minutes for Kase to return, and if he doesn't return within those minutes he is out of the preliminaries and it would be just Sora against Menma. Kase had left a clone with Hinata and Hanabi after he left the hospital and her to rush back to the arena, and with less than 3 minutes left Kase had managed to return to the arena and he looks ready to take on either one, but Kase would sense that Menma could be a problem since he always rely on the Nine Tails chakra too much, that Kase and Sora would need to team up to take down Menma or they will lose their chances to be in the finals. The match began, and immediately, Menma summoned a blood clone. The clone went for Sora while Menma went for Kase. Kase and Menma showed off good skills, but Menma was surprised to face someone who could match with him. Even with the Nine Tails chakra, Menma slipped up and managed to get punched so hard that he fell to the ground and slid across the field. Then he got up just inches away from slamming his back into the wall. "You're good. You're better than that wimp brat of a Hyuga," Menma said, trying to mess with Kase's feelings to have the edge in this match. Kase did one of his nature jutsu, lightning style, thunderous strike. Kase yelled as yellow lightning came out of Kase's hands and struck at Menma, only for Menma to dodge it in time as the strike was fast. "Whoa," Menma said as he looked at the wall behind him. Everyone was in shock to see how much damage it had caused. Then Menma looked at Kase only to see a roaring fist coming at Menma. He got punched so hard that he bounced off the ground and returned to his feet. Then, he spit some blood on the ground with Sora and Menma's blood clones. Sora is fighting for his life as the clone is on the same level as Menma. Still, Sora used the signature Uchiha fireball and fired at the clone just for the clone to slide on its knees to the ground just to dodge the fireball, but only to look back and smug. That was weak. The clone said as he turned around only to see Sora firing at the clone with water bullets jutsu as it hits its target and made the clone to slide across the field and smacked its back to a tree. The audience, even Sora's family and clan, were impressive of his fireball and how he handles the clone. "That's my son, show that blood clone what you're made of." Kushina yelled, cheering her stepson on, but Kushina's cheer made Sora blush. "Oh, Mom. That's so embarrassing," Sora whispered to himself. Then he snapped out of it and saw the clone moving again, and Sora got back into his fighting stance, ready to take it on again. Back at the arena with Kase and Menma, Menma used much of the Nine Tails chakra, exhausted and trying to Kase from afar. "Why won't you fall?" Menma said as Menma used every jutsu taught by his father. They weren't enough to catch up with Kase. He put chakra to his feet and made him faster to get away. "Unlike you, Menma, I don't rely on chakra lot," he said as he started to run sideways on the wall and around the arena, making Menma use up as much chakra as he's going to use. After a minute, Menma finally got what he was talking about and deactivated his blood clone to regain his chakra. The clone left Menma to face the both of them, but Menma suddenly got kicked in his back, making him fall to the ground. He turned around and saw that it was Sora who had kicked him. "You made yourself way too easy now, Menma," Sora said as he cracked his knuckles and geared up to fight. Menma rushed at Sora, and the two started using their martial arts, but Menma was too lazy and relied on his chakra too much. Then Sora kicked Menma down as Sora crossed his arms. "And this is Konoha's ultimate bully?" Sora started. Kase came up next to Sora, and the two looked at him. "You're just too lazy, Menma. You can't even fight right and rely on your chakra too much," Sora said, pointing out his flaws while secretly Menma grabbed some dirt and threw it into Sora's and Kaze's eyes, blinding them. Menma got up and used his shadow clones, ordering them to drag them and take them to a nearby tree. The crowd couldn't do anything unless they broke the rules, but Kushina and Tsunade could only watch and hear that their sons had been tied to the tree sitting on the ground, and then Menma deactivated his clones and started beating them up. Tsunade was about to interfere but stopped when she heard Kaze scream in pain as Menma had a solid stick hitting Kaze and trying to break whatever bone Kaze had until Menma made him scream in terror as Menma broke Kaze's left arm and left shoulder. Sora watches angrily, but Menma is too pleased and proud to notice that Sora has cut his bonds to the tree. He strikes at Menma, hitting him within close range of his fireball. Menma sees the ball but is too late to dodge it, making the hit a critical and sending him flying across the arena as Kaze's right arm helps Sora up after getting him out of his bonds. "Hang in there, Kaze," Sora said, reassuring Kaze that Sora would be at his side even if they had to fight after dealing with Menma. Kaze leaned against the tree and held his left arm. "That bastard is going to die," Kaze said as he tried not to pass out. "I think you should just stay here. I'll deal with him," Sora said as he left Kaze's side and walked to the middle of the arena facing where Menma went. Just as Menma got up from the rubble and threw a rock off himself, he faced Sora. "You'll pay for that. You and your clan will pay," Menma said as he summoned enough chakra to boost his stamina. Then he rushed at Sora, who then dashed at Menma, ready to take him down and make him pay for fighting dirty. Sora activated his Sharingan and dodged Menma's oncoming fist, then punched at Menma and hooked his face. Sora grabbed Menma's left arm and threw Menma over his shoulder, making Menma go flying several feet away and slide across the ground, only for Menma to get up and look ready to kill. "You filthy Uchiha, how dare you touch me? I'm the 4th Hokage's son, and you should be bowing at my feet," Menma said as he pulled out a kunai and was ready to strike at Sora. The crowd was shocked at what they were looking at, and Sora looked at them and then looked behind Menma. Sora stopped being in his stance and crossed his arms with a smirk at Menma, and then Sora deactivated his Sharingan. "Oh, just shut up and take a punch," Sora said, confusing Menma as to what he meant. Menma turned around only to see a roaring fist right at his face. Menma's legs trembled, then he landed flat on his butt, covering his nose with both his hands as his nose bleeding and noticed a purple aura, then looked up at Kaze only to see him using the strength of 100 seal, and Kaze even used his sleeveless kimono to wrap entire broken arm, then he used his mesh shirt to tie around his neck resting on his right should holding up his arms. "So, you like being big, huh?" Kaze said as he narrowed his eyes and slightly grit his teeth, scaring the crap out of Menma. "Now. Hold on, Kaze." Menma started as he tried to crawl away, but Sora blocked Menma's path, still standing where he was. Then Menma looked up at Sora. "Now. Come on, I was kidding," Menma said, trying to escape the situation he had dug himself into. Then Menma looked back at Kaze, who was now standing over him, and his eyes were shadowed. "This is where you fail," Kaze said as he whined back his right arm and hooked Menma's face, breaking a few of his teeth and knocking him out with one powerful punch. Sora chuckled as he stepped away, letting Menma's knocked-out body fall to the ground. Then Sora at Kaze. "How are you feeling, Kaze?" Sora said, feeling concerned for Kaze after what Kaze had gone through. "I'll be fine. Just need this healed and be good to go," Kaze said, and then he deactivated his seal, which Sora was still surprised by. "How did you do that?" Sora started looking at Kaze with amazement. "I thought only Lady Tsunade and Tenten could do that?" Sora said as he walked up to Kaze and checked his arm for him. "I just concentrated my chakra, and it appeared just like Mom said," Kaze said, surprising Sora. Everyone who heard him, even Tsunade, was shocked at what he said, and she gasped and covered her mouth. "Wait, are you accepting Tsunade as your mom?" Sora said in shock. "Yeah, I am. I gave it a good thought, and I deserve a family," Kaze said, but the two remembered they were still in a match. Sora thought about something and then looked at Kaze. "Say, Kaze." Sora started, and then Kaze looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Are you planning to take on Neji?" Sora asked, curious about what Kaze would do if he went through. "You bet, Sora. I'm not letting someone just get away from almost killing their own family." Kaze said he was determined and planned to ensure Neji was taught a lesson. Sora turned to the referee, Oi ref, I hear it. Sora said as he turned back to Kase. Are you sure, Sora? Kase started as he saw Sora didn't regret his choice. If you're okay with it, Sora. I'm winning this for our family. Kase said, waiting to hear what Sora had to say about this. Menma was being taken away to the hospital. I'm dead sure, Kase, you need this better than I do. Sora said as he smiled at his choice and wanted Kase to go through to the finals. Plus, I'm more than curious if you or Naruto are the strongest, he said as he left the arena with Kase and headed back to the stands, but they both stopped at the staircase. You go ahead, Sora. I need to go back on Hinata and check myself in just to get my arm fixed, Kase said as Sora nodded in agreement, and he went up the stairs to hear what would happen next. Half an hour later, Kase did what he would do and checked himself into the hospital. He was lucky that he got the same room as Hinata, who was still out cold from her fight against Neji, and even Hanabi remained by her side, not caring what her family thought. All she wanted was to see her sister safe and recover. While waiting for Hinata to recover, Kase and Hanabi started chatting and getting to know each other better. 3 weeks later and just a week away from the finals, Kase had finally been able to leave the hospital after 3 weeks of having his broken arm and shoulder fixed. He was happy to have his family visit him, mostly Hinata, who left her Hyuga clan after she didn't like the way she was about to be killed and had moved into Tsunade's home in the Uchiha district along with her sister Hanabi, who was so shocked at the state of her sister and after her match against Neji that she didn't want to be anywhere near her former clan after that. Kase happily got let out of the hospital. The first person he sees is Hinata, who is coming to visit him, but he doesn't know he is let out until she sees him. Kase rushed to Hinata and immediately hugged her. I don't care how much you visit me. I miss you, he said. Hinata couldn't help but giggle as she wrapped her arms around his neck and then kissed his cheek. Oh, you silly goofball, she said as Kase chuckled and wrapped his arms around her lower back. So, what's new? He started to feel like catching up with her, but he did feel like she was hiding something from him. Oh, you know, I moved in with your mother, she said, and Kase was dumbfounded by this. Wait, you did what? He started as he tried to process what he had just been told. How? When? He said, wanting to know what happened between her and her clan. Well, I didn't like how my clan worked, and Hanabi and I had moved into Tsunade's home about a week ago, she said as she couldn't help but giggle at the look on Kase's expression. Kase is still processing what his ears have just heard. Are you serious? Kase said as he still had Hinata hugged, and his face blushed. Then Hinata nodded her head. Yes, I am serious, Kase, we're staying with you, and that's that, she said and giggled. Hinata broke away from their hug and took Kase's hand as she led him back home. Come on, your mother will be pleased that you're out of the hospital, she said as she started running, startling Kase a little. Still, he composed himself and smiled as he picked up the paste and ran beside her. After half an hour of returning to the Uchiha district, Kase and Hinata were exhausted. I win, Kase. You owe me a dinner date. Hinata giggled as Hinata and Kase slowly got their breath back while walking normally back to Tsunade's house and holding hands. So just to be clear, Hinata, when were you going to tell me about you and your sister moved in? He asked, being curious when they moved in. Hinata looked at him with a smile. When I came to see you, I wanted it to be a surprise, he said, which made Kase more dumbfounded. Well, I'm surprised, so it worked, he said as they giggled at each other. Then they arrived at Tsunade's house and walked in. As Hinata closed the front door behind her, they both took off their sandals. They walked into the living room where Tsunade was sitting on a couch with Shizune sitting next to her on an armchair while Tenten was out back training with Hanabi, who wanted to start her training and become a shinobi just like Kase. Tsunade and Shizune looked at the hallway. Kase, Tsunade started as she got off the couch, approached her son, and hugged him. Oh my baby boy, I'm so happy you've fully recovered, Tsunade said as she tightly hugged Kase, making Hinata and Shizune giggle at the scene before them. Tsunade stopped hugging Kase and stood up. Now, would you like anything to eat, Kase? She asked as Kase nodded and smiled. Yeah, hospital food is just yuck, he said as everyone giggled, and they didn't blame him for that too. Alright, I'm making us lunch. She started, then turned to Hinata. Could you tell those two to cool off, she said as Hinata smiled and nodded. She went outside to tell Tenten and Hanabi that Kase was finally out and Tsunade would be making lunch for everyone, a sigh of relief for Tenten. Thank Kami, training your sister is a nightmare. Tenten started as she looked back at Hanabi with a playful devilish smile and then back at Hinata. In a good way, she said as the trio giggled. Then Tenten helped Hanabi off the ground, and they returned inside the house. Meanwhile, in Kushina's household, everything has been peaceful between the two families. Even Sora started staying with his family again. Kimba told him after the Chunin exams that he was very proud that he defended Kase and that he was impressed by Sora's fireball jutsu. At the same time, the weeks went on for them. The Sand siblings, Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, and even Sora, were training as hard as they could so they could keep up with their skills. With everyone taking a break from training and half of the group with their partners, Naruto was leaning on Temari as he was slowly getting used to it. Then he looked up and kissed her jaw, getting her attention. "Now you want something," she started as she smirked and looked down at Naruto, who smiled back at her. "Okay, tell me what you want, son fox," she said as she brushed her hand through his hair. "We know each other too well," he started, chuckled, and kept his eyes on Temari. "I'm wondering if you would like to go on our very first official date," he said as Temari's face lit up and a faded shade of pink appeared on her face. "Well," Temari started, and then she cleared her throat. "It's about time you asked me out, son fox," she said, then tilted her head and kissed Naruto's lips. After a few minutes, they split apart. "I'll take you out tonight," he said as Temari kissed his forehead and smiled softly at him, and her eyes halfway shut. "That sounds like a plan. Just be sure it will make a night to remember," she said as Naruto smiled at her and caressed her left cheek. "Alright, that's enough break." Sakura started as she and everyone got up and patted their clothes. "So, continue training, or we do our own thing for the rest of the day?" she asked as Naruto and Sakura looked at her. "We got plans now," Naruto said. Then Sakura yelped slightly, suddenly lifted by Gaara's sand as she looked at him. "We're going on a date," Gaara said as Sakura was puzzled, and then she giggled. "You got away for words," she said as Gaara walked off with Sakura, sitting on the sand and being carried away. "Break sounds nice. We've been training for the past few weeks," Kankuro said as everyone nodded in agreement. They got up from the ground and headed back to Kushina's house. Everyone sat and relaxed in the home while Naruto and Temari visited their mother, Kurora. She was busy talking to Kimba and Rasa, but she turned her head and looked at them. "Is something the matter?" she asked. Then Kimba and Rasa looked at them, too. We're going on our first official date tonight." Naruto started as Kimba, and Rasa was very happy for Naruto and Temari to go on their date and hoped they would have a good time together. Kurora, on the other hand, was screaming in her head but still showing a smiling face on the outside. Just before Kurora was going to say anything, Kushina came into the living room from the kitchen. "What's this about a date?" she asked curiously as she looked at the adult trio, then at Naruto and Temari. Then her mind finally clicked, and it was Kushina's turn to scream in her head but showing a calm face on the outside. "Well, just be back before 9 or 10, she said, then walked back into the kitchen and hummed. Naruto and Temari didn't notice that both mothers were screaming in their heads, but their husbands could tell as Naruto and Temari went upstairs to get themselves ready for their first ever date and teased Naruto. Temari went to the bathroom first. "Better luck next time, son fox," Temari said as she was closing the door and winked at Naruto. Naruto pouted. "Next time? I always let my precious desert fox get the win," he said as he crossed his arms but couldn't help but still smile that he was lucky to have someone like Temari. Temari had her back to the bathroom door and softly smiled, her right hand over her heart. "Precious," she softly said, then she got undressed and went for her shower while Naruto looked through a list of restaurants and found the perfect one. It was the cost of the meals that made him frown. He wanted to make this night special for Temari, so Naruto swallowed his pride and went downstairs to talk to Kurora and Rasa. Naruto went up to his parents as they were talking about something else, and then they stopped and looked at their son. "Something the matter, son?" Kurora asked as she knew her kids by now that they needed something when they came and saw her or Rasa. I don't like asking," he started as Kurora felt she knew what it could be. "I would like a raise in my allowance," he said as he waited to hear what his parents would say. "Is this a pricey place that you wanted to take Temari?" Rasa asked, then Naruto nodded his head. "Well," Kurora started as she paused momentarily and looked at her son. "Alright, just this once, Naruto," she said, reaching into her purse and giving Naruto money to spend on the date. Naruto's face lit up, and he went up to his parents, hugged his mother and went back upstairs to get ready for his date with Temari. I hope he spends that money wisely. Rasa said as Kurora nodded in agreement. Oh, I know you will. They both will, she said with a small smile that even scared Rasa. Half an hour later, Naruto and Temari were in two different bedrooms and ready for their date. Temari was the first to come out of the bedroom wearing an ocean blue kimono with the trimmings showing head shapes of foxes, holding together a white obi belt. Her hair is also tied back to a simple bun style. She's wearing ruby lipstick, followed by Naruto, wearing a white button shirt, a gray button vest, a black jacket, and black pants from the bedroom just across from Temari. The two looked at each other, their eyes widened slightly, and their faces showed a slight surprise expression. At the same time, in Temari's head, holy kami. I want his meat already. She thought just as her cheeks were warm and a shade of pink, while in Naruto's head, holy kami. Marry me already. Naruto thought as his cheeks also showed a shade of pink. You look beautiful, Temari. Naruto said as he blushed and smiled at her. They held hands and walked down the stairs. You're very handsome yourself, Naruto, she said as she couldn't keep her eyes off him. Once downstairs, they sat with their parents, waiting for them. Now, please don't do anything you'll both regret. Okay, Kurora said as she approached her kids. She kissed Naruto's cheek, then she kissed Temari's cheek. You both just look so beautiful, she said as Naruto and Temari smiled at their mother, then left the house to go on their date. We'll be careful, Mom. Naruto and Temari said in unison as they left the house and walked to the restaurant. It would take some time to get there, but within the shadows, someone watched them and had their eyes on one of them as the shadow figure carefully followed them, biding their time until they wanted to strike. Kurora thought of something back in the house and turned to her husband. Dear, where's Gaara? I haven't seen him since he got back after dropping off Sakura, she asked as Rasa had a little think for a minute, then he remembered and looked at his wife. Oh right, he's out on a date with Sakura. He was going to spend time with her all day, so that was after he came back, he said, explaining to his wife their son's whereabouts. On a different date on the other side of Konoha, Gaara and Sakura are having a lovely time together. Sakura is wearing a white version of her clothes with green trimmings, and her hair is tied back into a small, low ponytail. She had white lipstick while Gaara was just Gaara. This is a lovely restaurant you found, Gaara. How did you come across this place? Sakura asked as she took her time with food and enjoying her date with Gaara. I spotted it while we were shopping a couple of days ago, he explained as he also took his time with his food. Just as they were enjoying themselves, Sakura couldn't help but be a bit nosy about who would be coming into the restaurant, but what she saw shocked her a little. Oh wow. I didn't expect this, Sakura said, getting Gaara's attention as he followed her gaze. He was surprised that Naruto and Temari were at the same restaurant. Naruto and Temari were about to be seated when they saw Sakura waving at them. Then they waved back at her and Gaara as Naruto and Temari sat down and ordered food. After about an hour of the four of them taking their time and showing manners inside the restaurant, it was time to pay the bill. Then, Naruto and Gaara went to the counter while Temari and Sakura waited at the main doors for their boyfriends. You honestly didn't know we were here, Temari? Sakura asked as she and Temari chatted, but Temari shook her head. No, we didn't know you two were here. Naruto just wanted to take me to a special restaurant, Temari explained as Sakura nodded. That's alright, I believe Gaara and I would have done the same thing, Sakura said, then giggled, and Temari giggled with her. Just then, Naruto and Gaara rejoined the girls, and the group left the restaurant together and headed down the same way. Just curious, you two. Temari started as both her brother and Sakura looked at her. Have you two been on a date mostly all day since after training? She said as Sakura nodded at Temari. Then Gaara said, I thought it would be a good change since we've all been spending time together. As Naruto and Temari nodded, Gaara explained, well, that makes sense. Naruto started, stopped, and turned around, like Gaara, as they defended Temari and Sakura from shurikens. Then they saw who threw them, and it was a woman who had herself covered with a hooded cloak. My, two of them in one village. The woman started with the evilest smirk that would send chills down your spine. This will be most divinity fun, the woman said as she slowly walked toward the group. Who are you? Naruto started, and what do you want? Gaara finished as the woman stopped and still smirked. I'm just a simple rogue shinobi passing by. The the woman said as she smirked. Then, the woman checked them both out. My, I'm still surprised that there are 2 Jinchuriki in this village. She started making the group seem uneasy and wanting to get away from her, and just for who I am, just know that I am a collector for power, and I will come back for the 2 of you later. The woman said as she shine away by a zap of lighting, leaving the group puzzled. Gaara, I'm ready to go home now. That woman was creepy. She said as everyone nodded in agreement. I'll take you home now, he said as he summoned some sand and lifted Sakura, spoiling her by doing this while Naruto and Temari held hands and headed back to the Uchiha district, hoping that neither of them would see the woman again. Still, it depends on what will happen next. Once Naruto and Temari return to Kushina's house, they tell everyone what happened after their date and accurately to being mothers. Kurora and Kushina check over Naruto. Still, he was fine. Then Kurora checked over. Temari was also fine. I will need to inform both 3rd and 4th Hokage tomorrow, Rasa said as everyone nodded in agreement. But once things had settled down and Gaara returned to his family 20 minutes later, leaving Sakura in the care of her family, everyone had changed for bed and rested as they hoped they wouldn't see or meet the woman. A week had passed, and it was now the time for the Chunin exams to continue. The finalist had entered the ring instead of 8, and now 10 genin were going through. They listened to another boring speech from the 4th Hokage, in which the students were getting bored to death. Once the speech was done, everyone in the audience and finalists looked up to the screen to see who was going first, and it was a bit surprising that starting off the first set of rounds, Naruto was up against Temari, who was a bit surprised as the 2 looked at each other while holding hands. Please be nice, Temari, Naruto said as he didn't want to fight her, but Temari had a playful smirk on her lips and winked at her brother-turned-boyfriend. No, can do, Naruto. We have to fight, and I know it won't be any hard feelings. I still love you, silly, Temari said as Naruto smiled a little bit. Then, the 2 leaned close and kissed in front of everyone, and everyone who found it a pleasant moment went, "Ah," while others just wanted to watch the fight. Everyone else left the arena, but Sakura and Gaara held hands while walking back. Sakura looked at Gaara. I hope we don't fight. I wouldn't have the heart to go through with it, she said as Gaara looked at her. I know how you feel, but if we do go against each other, just know I'm treating you for another date, he said, reassuring her that everything would be okay. If they fight each other, Sakura scooted closer to Gaara and leaned on his left shoulder as they walked back to the stands. Naruto and Temari broke their lips and went from holding each other's hands as they walked away to standing at opposite ends of each other. Temari had a small, sad expression that she didn't want this to happen, but she then had a good bet in mind as she looked at Naruto with another smirk. Hey Naruto, I have a bet that I know this will make you fight, she said as she crossed her arms and still smirked at him. What do you have in mind? He asked as he looked a little puzzled, hoping it would not make their mother freak out at them. Naruto is hoping it didn't freak out his real mother, too. The loser proposes the winner, she said, as she couldn't help but giggle at the look on Naruto's face as he was hunched over. His jaw dropped, his arms dangling, and his eyes widened so that he couldn't speak, but at the stands, 2 mothers had a piece of their clothing in their mouths and their fists clenched and finally showing glowing red angry eyes. Even their family were shocked of the sudden bet from Temari. What is with that girl? Kurora and Kushina said in unison as they looked at each other, but what was said next made both spirits want to leave their bodies. You're on Temari, Naruto said as his 2 mothers looked back down at the arena and looked at Naruto with shocked faces. They fainted, causing Kimba and Rasa to panic slightly. Rasa chose to be with his family after receiving the information that Naruto and Temari had told him about the strange woman last week. The referee started the match. Naruto and Temari rushed at each other first. Temari used her giant fan to try and blow Naruto away, but he dodged it by spitting and ducked down on the ground. Then he summoned several shadow clones as he and his clones rushed at Temari to try and get her to lose balance, but she used her giant fan once more to blow away the clones before she faced Naruto. Wind style. Tornado blow, she said as she inhaled. Then she blew out of her mouth a tornado that went to Naruto, blew him away, and slammed his back into a tree. She thought she was too rigid and worried as Temari saw Naruto come off the tree and land on the ground, only for the Naruto she looked at was a clone. Temari was shocked as she quickly looked around, only to see Naruto approaching her. Wind style. Gust wind fist, he said as a gust of wind formed around his left fist and punched Temari in the face, causing her to fly backwards and land on her back on the ground. Then she flipped herself back on her feet and looked to her right, and spit out some blood. Then she looked at Naruto and wiped the drip of blood from her chin. Cheap shot Naruto. That hurt, she said as Naruto was sad that he hurt her that badly. I'm sorry, Temari, he said, but before he could say anything else, Temari whacked Naruto with her fan, making Naruto twirl several times in the air, then landed on the ground and rolled away from her. Now we're even, she said as she stood up straight, with her right hand on her hip and left hand holding her giant fan, showing a stern expression. That could have killed me, Naruto. What were you thinking, she said as she walked over to him while Naruto was getting back up to his feet, and he felt dizzy and unsteady. I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry, Temari, he said as he showed a sad expression and his heart felt hurt that he did something so risky to Temari. Just as Naruto got back on his feet, Temari shoved her arms under his armpits and held him close. Just don't do it ever again. I will make you regret it, she said as she could feel Naruto nod his head against her shoulder. I'm sorry. I don't know how many times I need to say it, Temari, but I'm deeply sorry, he said as a tear escaped his right eye. Temari noticed this as she wiped his tears away, and they looked at each other. Come on, we got a match to finish, just don't repeat it. I still love you, you big dummy, she said as she leaned close and kissed Naruto's lips, trying to make him feel better. Then she parted from his lips. Alright, Temari, I'm never going to use that style ever again, he said as he kissed her lips back. After a minute, Naruto parted from Temari's lips and looked at each other. Think you'll forgive me, Temari? He asked, worried that she hated him for what he did, but Temari nodded. I do forgive you, Naruto. We can talk more about this later, okay, she said as Naruto nodded, and the two started fighting again. While the match was long, Naruto won against Temari as she was leaning on Naruto with her left arm over his shoulders, and Naruto was holding her left side in her giant fan. Well, I think that answers that then, Naruto said as Temari looked up at him. What do you mean by that, Naruto? She asked with her left brow cocked and looked puzzled. I'm stronger than you. He chuckled and kissed his cheek. Temari also giggled, but then he stopped Naruto from walking and took his left hand from her side. What are you doing, Temari? He asked, puzzled at this. Temari still held his hand, and then she got down on her left knee and looked up at Naruto with a smile. Naruto Hirano, the third Sand Prince, we've been together through thick and thin. You were my brother since we were kids. You've been by my side whenever you needed comfort, and I've been by your side just to keep you company when our parents were busy, and our brothers didn't feel like playing with you. Sometimes. She started as Naruto's heart skipped a beat and blushed heavily while their family was listening, even wondering what Naruto's answer would be as they waited for Temari to finish and asked him. Naruto, as much it should have been, you're proposing. And it's still a bet, so I'm doing it. She giggled. Naruto giggled too as Temari continued. What I'm saying is, Naruto, I love you with the deepest and from the bottom of my heart that I will be by your side no matter the crisis, no matter how serious it gets. I'll always be by your side and in your life. Naruto, will you marry me? She said as she waited for Naruto to answer her. Naruto took in what she said to him, and his heart was racing fast as he slowly showed a smile on his lips and gently held Temari's hand. Temari, we have been through thick and thin, you were there for me, and I was there for you, but we understood our family would be busy sometimes, and it saddens us. I love you and our family, so Temari, he started. Temari looked up at him, waiting to hear what he would say. My answer is yes, I will marry the woman of my dreams. I will marry the Sand Princess, he said. Temari's face lit up, and she showed a soft smile and tears down her face. She stood up and kissed Naruto's lips, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Naruto wrapped his arms around Temari's lower back, accepting Temari's proposal. Everyone in the crowd was cheering and clapping at the proposal while Kurora and Kushina, who had regained consciousness just as Temari started her small speech, were taking it in. Their stern expressions softly changed to a caring and loving expression. Oh well, they had to grow up sometime. Kurora said while Kushina nodded in agreement. Then they both started tearing up, seeing this moment before them while holding their husbands' hands. Standing on the stadium roof was the strange woman from a week ago. How touching. It's too bad I'm taking both redheads with me, she said as she giggled. Then, one of her shinobi appeared next to her. He's waiting for your signal, Malady, he said, but the woman shook her head. Not yet. I'm letting them have their fun. Tell him I shall send him a special smoke signal, she said as her minion nodded, and then he left her side to return with the others. Naruto and Temari finally stopped kissing and left the arena to return to their families while the screen showed the next fighters, Kankuro vs Shino Aburame. As they went to the arena and got ready, the referee started the match after waiting a few minutes. Their match was an intense one just as Kankuro thought he was going to be the winner, but Shino somehow turned the tables on Kankuro and won the match, leaving Kankuro hurt as he was being carried away to the hospital. Kurora looked at Naruto and Temari since they were the first ones to be finished. Can you two please stay by your brother's side? We will visit once this tournament is over. She asked as the two lovebirds nodded. Then Naruto hopped off Temari's lap and held her hand. Then Temari got up off her seat. Then the two walked off heading for the hospital to stay with Kankuro while the screen picked the next fighters and it stopped on Sasuke and Shikamaru. The two went down to the arena standing just the opposite to each other. Then the referee started the third match of the first round as both Sasuke and Shikamaru were giving it their all, and this version of Sasuke doesn't have that power struggle unlike his original counterpart. As their match was tearing up the arena, it was Shikamaru who came out on top, leaving Sasuke out cold but not injured as he was being carried by Gaara's sand to bring Sasuke back up to the stands with everyone else. Then Shikamaru left the arena also returning with his friends. Then the screen popped up Sakura against Gaara. As that happened, Sakura had a worried face as she looked at Gaara, who was not next to her, as that got her a bit more worried. But just as she looked to see where he went, he was standing at the railings. Sakura and I had talked about this. We refused to take part of this round. We both give up and don't bother try to change our minds, he said with a stern face towards both third and fourth Hokage. While Lord Third was confused, Minato was angry that he doesn't get to see this round and was about to force them to take part until Hiruzen stood up before him and spoke. We will pass this round as a double surrender, he said. Then Hiruzen sat back down on his chair and smoking his pipe. Then Gaara returned to his seat and Sakura leaned on him. Thank you, I wouldn't go through with it, she said as she scooted closer. Then Gaara wrapped his arm around her. Kurora got her son's attention. What's the matter, Gaara? I know you're dating, but I know there's something else about this, she asked, wanting to know her son's reason to make this a double surrender. I feel like something is going on, mother. I don't know what, but I will need my full strength, he said as he just looked down at the arena waiting for the final first round match to start and finish. While on the roof of the strange woman had a stern expression and gritted her teeth a little bit. So has a feeling about something, she said. Then her expression changed to a more dark smirk. It doesn't matter, I don't think with this many shinobi here would be enough anyway, she said as she watched and waited for the final first round too. The screen showed the final two being Kei's Senju against Neji Hyuga, who both showed stern expressions to each other, and just as Kei's got up, Hinata quickly grabbed and gripped his hand, getting his attention as he looked down at her, being a bit puzzled. Please don't kill him, Kei's. I know what he tried to do was cruel and orders from the clan, but please don't be like him, she started as she looked up at Kei's with a teary face. He's still my cousin and I want you to be better. Just do the right thing, she said as Kei's wiped her tears away and kissed her lips. I won't kill him, I promise, he said as he walked away to head for the arena while Hinata held Tsunade's right hand. Then Hinata held her sister's right hand. Then Hanabi scooted close to her sister to give her comfort as they watched the match. The woman on the stadium roof looked at Kei's with a puzzling expression and her left brow cocked. Why am I sensing something big from this kid, she said as she watched and see what would happen as the two got the arena and ready themselves. The referee had started the match and both Kei's and Neji charged at each other, hitting each other with punches and kicks from their martial arts as the two seemed to be on par with each other, even throwing tricks at each other. But Kei's proved to be a strong opponent to Neji as he was struggling to try to get the upper hand. To take this seriously and want to win this badly, Neji activated his Byakugan. Then he used the gentle fist to try and knock Kei's down. But Kei stood his ground and formed his arms in an X formation to block. Is he crazy? Tsunade, Hinata, and Hanabi said in unison as they watched Kei's being hit by the gentle fist. Still, the wind only shoved Kei's slightly, leaving everyone, even Neji and Kei's family, confused and puzzled. Hinata activated her Byakugan and scanned Kei's body to see what was stopping him from being blown away. But what she saw was his chakra being a mix of standard blue and a purple chakra aura appeared as Hinata covered her mouth and gasped. getting everyone around her their attention. What is it, Hinata? Tsunade started as she placed her hand on her shoulder. Hanabi spoke up, yeah, what do you see? She finished what Tsunade began to do, but what Hinata saw left her speechless, as this chakra felt too powerful for anyone. She wouldn't be sure if Naruto and Gaara would handle it either, as Hinata looked up at Tsunade. That's another chakra signature within his body. She explained as Tsunade showed a puzzled and worried expression as they turned to face the arena once more to see what else would happen. I sense something is wrong with this brat. If he shows promise, then I'll have 3 powerful shinobi for my experiment. The woman said as she smirked too evil as she continued to watch the match as Kase is focusing his chakra and a gem appeared on his forehead. Then Kase showed the first time of his yin release, shocking everyone. Even Tenten and Tsunade was shocked that he could do that. Now, this is a party, the woman said, smirking with much pleasure. Kase rushed at Neji, showing how strong he could be by breaking the floor below Neji just as he jumped out of the way. Before the match could continue, the woman raised her arm. She fired a signal flare with black smoke coming from it, signaling her forces to attack Konoha while they were distracted by Kaze's raw power. But the flare alerted everyone as they looked up into the sky, seeing the smoke. What in the shinobi world? Kase and Neji said in unison as the woman removed the hood from her head and revealed her face. Then suddenly, forces of the woman's clan that shows them wearing head protectors with the symbol for space next to her shinobi forces on the roof were Auto Shinobi led by Orochimaru, who appeared next to the woman. Hee, I think it's time we show our power. He said as the woman nodded. Just remember our deal. You get what you want from Konoha, but I get the boys, she said as Orochimaru nodded. Then he raised his arm and down again, signaling the attack, as both forces sprung their attack, appearing all around Konoha, attacking anyone on sight and killing families. Then, both Hokage sprang into action with their fellow shinobi as Kakashi hit the side of his hand to an alarm button on the wall next to him, signaling the Anbu for battle stations. As the battle scattered everyone, most of the shinobi got separated from their main groups while the woman only walked to the side of the stadium roof above the main entrance as she watched her work happening. With everyone scattered, it was hard to keep up with anyone around Konoha as Orochimaru was still at the stadium, and he was pleased with his work so far. Konoha was slowly coming to ruins, and they were losing shinobi, but Orochimaru was slowing forces too. Still, the strange woman went to the other side of the stadium as she was handling some other shinobi from the Leaf. Still, she handled them efficiently, but suddenly, she was knocked down, and her body slid across the stadium and next to Orochimaru, who looked down and smirked. Bad hair day, Hoshi, he said and hissingly laughed. Then Hoshi stood up, removed her hooded cloak, and cracked her neck. Oh, shut up, our main party guests are here, she said with a dark smirk on her lips. Hiruzen and Minato were on the stadium roof to face the enemy leaders. Orochimaru smirked, the old man is mine, he said as he snapped his fingers, and his Sound 4 appeared on the 4 corners of the stadium and put up a powerful barrier that no one could get in and get out. Nice trick, Orochimaru, Hoshi said as she took out a bright white kunai, and then she charged at Minato and took him to one part of the stadium. Then Orochimaru attacked Hiruzen. Meanwhile, just at the center of Konoha, Kase was with Hinata and Neji, making sure civilians were being saved while taking out some Auto Shinobi and some of Hoshi's forces, while at the east side of Konoha Kurora, Rasa, Kimba, and Kushina are taking on a good amount of the 2 forces with some Leaf Shinobi as backup. Still, it seems the battle to them was too easy. Something doesn't seem right, Kushina said as the others shouted in agreement. Gaara, Temari, Sakura, and Kankuro separated from Naruto as they were on the village's east side. Where is that blonde bastard of mine? Temari said as she was furious that she got separated from Naruto, and even their brothers were annoyed. He better be alright, I'm not sure how we lost him during this fight. Kankuro said, worried about his brother. The other Konoha shinobi were busy fighting Auto, and Hoshi's forces were north of the village. Meanwhile, Naruto was chased and drove toward Hokage Mount, where he faced some Auto and Hoshi forces on his own. You guys need to back off, Naruto said as he threw some shurikens at both shinobi forces, and only some got hit while others rushed at him and tried to knock him out without hurting Naruto too much. Naruto summoned 100 shadow clones as they all rushed at the 2 forces, either knocking them down or killing them just to defeat them. Still, both Otto and Hoshi's forces stopped fighting and slowly backed away from Naruto, leaving him puzzled and confused. "Hey, why did you all stop?" he said, wanting to know their reason. Still, Naruto gets whacked at the back of his head by Hoshi Kukin as she looks at the weapon. "Not using this toy anymore," she said. Then she dropped her toy and slowly walked over and hovered above Naruto as she looked down at Naruto and smirked. "One down, 2 to go," she said as she picked up Naruto and put him over her shoulders. Then she looked at both forces. "Go, make sure this village suffers," she said as she turned around and walked away. Naruto headed for the Hokage tower to get a good view of the village. About 5 minutes later, Hoshi arrived at the tower and left a tied-up Naruto on the floor, who was just waking him from his knockout. "Ow, what hit me?" he said as she slowly opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was Hoshi. "Who are you, and what do you want with me?" he demanded, wanting to know why he and his brother were targeted for this woman's pleasure. Hoshi only turned her head over her right shoulder and smirked. No spoilers, Naruto," she said as Naruto looked at her with his teeth gritted. He can only watch helplessly as he hears all the screams and pain from below the tower that is making his blood boil. "Tell me this then. If you're here, then who's in the stadium?" he asked, wanting to know her game. Hoshi watched the chaos below them, not even turning around to answer him. "Oh, that's just a blood clone," she started, then she finally turned around and leaned her butt on the railing. "I will be going to that stadium soon once I have captured your brother and that young Senju," she said with a smirk as she crossed her arms. "I'd ask what for, but that would be spoilers to you, isn't it?" he said as Hoshi nodded at Naruto. Then she turned around again to see the chaos, only to be surprised as she just got suckered and punched by Temari, who jumped from a building across the street and saved Naruto. Hoshi stumbled back, walking backwards and far from Naruto as she collected herself, rubbed her left cheek and looked to see who hit her. Well, if it isn't Suna's Sand Princess," she said as she saw Temari holding Naruto in her arms and hunched over in a primal-like defensive position. "He's mine," Temari said with a low voice and a hint of venom. Orochimaru and the blood clone of Hoshi are having trouble with the 3rd and 4th Hokage at the stadium. "I think it's time we bring in the main event," Hoshi said as she looked at Orochimaru with a smirk, and he looked back with a sinister smirk. "I do believe you're right," he said as he began using the forbidden jutsu, Edo Tensei, bringing the 1st and 2nd Hokage back to life. This stopped Hiruzen and Minato in their tracks as they were deeply shocked to see 1st and 2nd being brought back just to fight them both. Back at the Hokage tower as Hoshi was about to attack Temari for taking her prize suddenly Gaara, Kankuro, and Sakura made it to the tower and stood beside Temari defending Naruto. At the same time, Temari cut his bonds, freeing him, causing Hoshi to grit her teeth. "You think you can defeat me?" she said, but before she could boast about how strong she was, one of the Otto shinobi landed next to her. "Mistress, we are outnumbered. We have to retreat," he said as Hoshi rolled her eyes and scoffed. Fine, signal the retreat and make sure no one follows you," she said as the Otto shinobi nodded, then left the tower's roof. Hoshi turned to the group and sighed. "Well, you all get a lucky break," she started, smirking again, looking at them. "But I have one of my prizes in hand," she said as she shunshine away and teleported somewhere else in Konoha, leaving the group confused. What did that white-haired bitch mean? Naruto said as she got off the ground. Then he and Temari embraced each other tightly, and Temari had tears streaming down her face. "I thought I lost you, dummy," she said as she nuzzled into Naruto's neck. "I'm still here, but next time, we stay together," he said as Temari and his brothers nodded in agreement. Suddenly, Sakura gasped and got everyone's attention. "Guys over there," she yelled and pointed at the Hokage Mount wall, seeing Hoshi with K's on her back and out cold, making the group furious as Naruto looked back at everyone. "Despite what I said, I'm going after her. Will you both find Hinata and Neji? Something must have happened for K's to be captured," he said as everyone nodded. But Temari rushed up to Naruto and grabbed his left arm. "I'm going with you. I'm not losing you, Naruto," she said, her face showing a bit of concern and worry but also furiousness at Hoshi. Naruto gently let Temari let go of his arm, and then he held her hand. "Let's go," he said as Temari nodded. The 2 desert foxes jumped from the tower and used the other buildings to reach the Hokage Mount. In contrast, the others went off to find Hinata and Neji. As they were last seen at the center of the village, they hurried to see what had happened to them. Back with Kushina and the others, things were better for them as they easily defeated the two forces, and they fell back. "Alright, you better head to the other sectors and help out while we go to the stadium," Kurora said as the Leaf Shinobi nodded and left the group's side. In contrast, the others rushed for the stadium to see if they could help out in any way possible, but a small group of Hoshi shadow clones halted them. "We don't have time for this." Kimba started as he rushed at the clones and took them on himself. "Go, I'll deal with them," he said as the trio nodded and rushed off. However, as they rushed and only managed a few blocks, Kushina stopped when she saw her kids fighting alone. Then she looked at Kurora and Rasa. "Go on ahead. I need to be there for my family," she said as they nodded at her and rushed to the stadium. Kushina dashed towards the Auto Shinobi, who had her sons cornered with just Sora defending his little brothers. "Get back, stay away from my brothers." Sora yelled as he threw a surprised explosive tag kunai. The tag exploded as it hit one of the Auto Shinobi in the shoulder, killing the shinobi and some around them, too. Still, just as the remaining ones came close, they suddenly felt a mighty and angry chakra. They looked to their left and saw Kushina coming right at them. Having seen Kushina coming at them and heard of her, the Auto Shinobi dropped their weapons and ran for it. Kushina stopped running and stopped next to her children. "You bastards better think twice," she yelled as she wanted to give them a piece of her mind, but she turned to her three sons, kneeled to their level, and hugged them. "Oh, thank Kami, you're alright," she said as her sons hugged her and the twins nuzzled into her chest for comfort. "Mom, what should we do?" Sora asked as he was too scared for his family's life. Kushina saw how frightened he was. She cupped his cheek. "Son, I know you care for your family, but your father and I are very strong shinobi." She started, then she looked down at her younger sons, then back at Sora. "I need you to take your brothers and get home. I will come for you when this is over, okay?" she said, trying to reassure her son as she showed a smile, and Sora nodded. "Yeah, okay mom," he said as he held each hand of his little brothers and started leading them home, but the twins didn't want to leave their mother. "Wait, what about mom?" they both said in unison, but Sora didn't answer them and just kept them moving and taking them back home. But suddenly the twins stopped, making Sora stop. Then he turned around. "What are you two doing?" "We need to get out of here," he said, but the twins shook their heads. "Not without mom," they both said in unison as they tried to get out of their brother's grip so they could get to her. "Mom will be fine. She wants us safe and we can't be around her to hold her back," he said, trying to convince his brothers that their mother will be alright. But the twins calmed down and went to their brother and hugged him. "We just..." Yuki started, "Want mom." Yuma finished as tears streamed down their face while looking up at Sora. "Mom, I'm fine, I promise," he said as his brothers nodded. They were about to leave when a few Auto Shinobi threw kunai at them. Sora grabbed his brothers and dodged the kunai in time, and then they were surrounded by a squad of Auto Shinobi. Before the Auto Shinobi made their move, each one started to suddenly fall to their backs, but the last one looked just in time and grabbed the person who killed the others, and to his surprise it was a young girl. "How did you do that?" the Auto Shinobi asked as he waits for an answer. "Like this," the girl said as she poofed, revealing to be a clone. Then the real one sliced the last Auto, saving the Uchiha brothers. Sora, Yuki, and Yuma looked to see their savior, and the twins rushed up to her and hugged her. Thank you, they both said in unison as the girl giggled and petted the twins' heads. "You're very welcome," she started. Then she looked at Sora and her eyes lit up and her heart skipped a beat. Then finally her cheeks blushed. "Thank you for saving me and my brothers," he said as he came up to her and offered his hand to shake, but the girl looked a bit daydreaming and has a bit of a nosebleed, but she snapped out of her trance and took his hand. "It was no problem, I was just happy to be around," she said as she didn't let go of his hand. "I'm Sora Uchiha," he said, probably introducing himself. Then the girl softly smiled. "I'm Fu. I originally came from Takigakure, but I ran away because of my condition," she said as Sora blushed just as the sun's ray came through a cloud and shine on Fu, making Sora's heart to skip a beat. Then he cleared his throat. "We need to get my brothers back to my home," he said as Fu nodded and understood. Then Sora picked up Yuki while Fu picked up Yuma, and the two shinobi started running back to the Uchiha district as Fu is following Sora. Back at the stadium everything is going just as Hoshi and Orochimaru had planned, as Hoshi is on par with Minato and even able to understand how Minato was fast, as Hoshi waited for Minato to throw his kunai, but once he did, Hoshi lunged for it and grabbed it, then rolled along the ground, then quickly got up. My. So what do you do with this thing? She said with a smirk, as Minato doesn't look worried as she threw the kunai behind her and it went all the way down into the arena. Then Hoshi lunged at Minato, wanting to end this fight. Menma for this whole time was just watching the chaos from a building and mostly smirking when he saw his former friends getting beaten up, but his smirks faded when they started to fight back. These fools are lacking in power, he said to himself. Then he looked at the stadium and just watching the fight unfolds with his arms crossed, and couldn't help but noticed how easily powerful Hoshi and Orochimaru are, leaving a dark smirk on his lips. Menma from his point of view also noticed another Hoshi who is running alongside the Hokage mount, and he couldn't tell, but he knew she has someone important on her back. Then he looked away and headed towards the stadium, thinking of a choice that will change his life forever. I'll show them what I'm made of, he said as he is almost at the stadium, avoiding shinobi on both sides just to reach his goal. With Gaara, Kankuro, and Sakura they found Hinata and Neji, who were fighting Auto Shinobi, but they seem ready to pass out before an Auto Shinobi strikes at Hinata. The shinobi gets kicked to the head by Sakura, who lands next to Hinata. Then Hinata fell to her knees and Sakura caught her in her arms. Hinata, are you okay? She asked as Hinata looked at Sakura and softly nodded. Then Gaara and Kankuro both appeared and helped Neji with the remaining forces before they started to retreat also. As soon the fight was over, the group settled down and get their breath back. Then Gaara looked at Neji. What happened to Kase? He asked, but Neji just shrugged, like I care about him, he said as Neji crossed his arms and turned away, keeping an eye out just in case if there's any more Auto or Hoshi's forces would attack them. As Neji done that, Kankuro clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Just before Kankuro gives Neji a piece of his mind, Gaara placed his hand on his brother's shoulder, stopping him, making Kankuro to turn and look at him, only to see Gaara shaking his head. Then the two looked towards Sakura and Hinata, drifting off in and out of consciousness. Hinata was slowly passing out from fighting too long. Hinata, come on now, stay awake, Sakura started as she gently shook Hinata. Then Hinata opened her eyes once more and looked up at Sakura. Are you okay? What happened to Kase? She asked as Gaara and Kankuro gathered around them, both wanting to hear what happened. I don't know. We were doing well. Next thing I know, I got hit by some sleeping dust. She started trying to stay awake, then she continued once her eyes were open, before I know what happened I was struggling. Kase helped me, but someone landed between us and knocked us down, and the last thing I saw was Kase being placed on someone's back. His hands and feet were tied together, she said as she finally couldn't fight the sleeping dust anymore and passed out. Sakura picked up Hinata in her arms, then went over to Kankuro and gave her to him. Kankuro raised a brow. Take her back to the Uchiha district. You're slightly faster than us, and we need to take her to safety, Sakura explained as Kankuro nodded and rushed off with Hinata in her arms, while Gaara and Neji looked at each other and then at Sakura. What's our next move, Sakura? Gaara asked, leaving Sakura puzzled. Why ask me? She said as she walked up to Gaara and tilted her head. You smarter and calmer than us, he said, leaving Sakura slightly blushed at his comment. Still, Sakura did a quick look around and then back at them. We should be getting Kase back. I'd rather not be on Lady Tsunade's shit list, Sakura said as Gaara nodded, but Neji just turned and walked away. Where are you going? This is a team effort, Neji, Sakura said as she held her fists at her hips and looked at Neji sternly. Neji stopped and turned slightly. I don't care about Kase or whose son he is. I care only for my family and the village, he said as he was about to walk away, but Sakura scoffed at him. Family? Sakura started as she was about to go to Neji, but Gaara placed his hand on her stomach. You got some nerve, Neji. What kind of family tries to kill their flesh and blood? She said as she was still pissed from his actions a month ago, but Neji didn't care and just walked away, going to fight any other Auto Shinobi and Hoshi's forces. Sakura wanted to give a piece of her mind, but Gaara stopped her. He's not worth it, Sakura, he said as he kissed her cheek, making her blush as she looked at him. Wow, she said as she looked away for a minute to calm down, then looked back at Gaara. Yeah, you're right, he isn't worth it, but we should get to Kase before we lost him, she said as Gaara nodded in agreement as they both ran together and headed toward the discretion where they last seen Hoshi with Kase. At the Uchiha district, Tsunade was protecting the children with Tenten and Shizune, and among the Uchiha children was Hanabi, who was with Tsunade, Tenten, and Shizune the whole time. Tenten remained in Tsunade's home with the children while Tsunade and Shizune was out in the streets beating up shinobi. I haven't had this much fun in ages, Tsunade said as she punched an auto shinobi right into a rocked wall while Shizune took this more seriously. I don't want to end this fun, Lady Tsunade, but please stay focused, she said as Tsunade playfully rolled her eyes. Alright, she started, and then she spotted Hoshi running alongside the Hokage mount with her son on her back. This shocked Tsunade and her eyes widened. Then she looked back at Shizune. Shizune, take care of things here, she said as she started running away from the district to save her son. Running through the forest with K's on her back, Hoshi is determined to return to her base with at least one of her prizes. She uses the trees to escape as fast as possible but comes to a dead end when she comes across the Forest of Death Tower. Rats, I must have taken a bad turn back there, she said as she looked behind her and ensured no one else followed her. As she slowly walked backwards and got closer to the tower, suddenly she got her face kicked from her left side, causing her to fall. Case fell off her back, and his body rolled towards the broken wall around the tower, remaining unconscious while Hoshi spit out some blood and stood back up to see Naruto and Temari standing there in fighting positions. Oh, you brats are just asking for it, Hoshi said as she got into a fighting position, but before she could do anything, an angry Tsunade shined behind Naruto and Temari. Tsunade had a stern expression and her arms crossed. Where do you think you're going with my son? She said as Hoshi pulled out a kunai and got ready. Oh, taking my prize to feed my hunger, she said as she looked where K's was and then back at the others. Hoshi lunged at the trio, and the trio lunged at Hoshi. Meanwhile, back in the village, Minato was having trouble with Hoshi's blood clone, and Hiruzen was having a bit of trouble with the first and second Hokage, trying to get the upper hand on the situation. Kurora and Rasa finally reached the stadium's roof and were surprised to see the sight before them, as they'd never seen a barrier like this before. Rasa tried his best with some leaf shinobi to remove the barrier, while Kurora felt like she was sensing a chakra she hadn't sensed in a long time. As she looked around, feeling where this chakra was coming from, Kurora followed the signature as it led her around the corner and headed for one of the Sound 4 members. As she approached one of the Sound members, she turned her head at Kurora and smirked. Don't come any closer, lady, Tayuya said as her more minor barrier protected her. She didn't look away from Kurora, and Kurora stopped dead in her tracks. Alright, I won't come any closer, Kurora said as she crossed her arms and looked at Tayuya. Something about her made Kurora think hard as she bit her left thumb, wondering why her chakra's signature felt familiar. Tayuya looked away to watch the battle while smirking. Still, she was already annoyed that Rasa and other leaf shinobi were hitting the barrier after a minute or two. Tayuya looked at Kurora once more, seeing that Kurora had got closer and was sitting on her knees looking at Tayuya. What do you want anyway? You're not attacking, that's for sure, she said, wanting to know why Kurora is like this. Still, Kurora noticed something on Tayuya's left forearm. Your arm. She started, causing Tayuya's lips to split slightly apart and raised a brow. Let me see your left forearm, Kurora said as Tayuya seemed confused and not sure what to make of this as she was hesitant to show her arm and not sure what Kurora was planning. In the Forest of Death, Hoshi is still attacking Naruto, Temari, and Tsunade as they don't give Hoshi an opening to escape. Blasted. Can't you people give me a break? She said, but then Temari punched the back of Hoshi's left knee, causing her to fall on one knee. Okay, there's your break, Temari said as she jumped away, had a smirk on her lips, and opened up her giant fan. Hoshi used her jutsu to try to give her some room. Fire style. Dragon breath jutsu, she said as she leaned back and forward. Fire came out of her mouth and aimed at the three, but they moved away too quickly that Hoshi couldn't get a hit on them. But Tsunade lunged at Hoshi and sucker punched Hoshi from her right jaw, causing Hoshi to lose balance. Then Naruto threw an explosive tag at Hoshi, but she moved out of the way as it exploded, causing damage to Hoshi's body. Ah! She screamed in pain as Naruto and Temari towered over her, their arms crossed while Tsunade went over to check on her son. But as soon Tsunade held her son in her arms, Hoshi started laughing, causing her to turn and face her. What's so funny? Naruto said as he seemed very pissed off from everything that happened. Oh, it's simple, Hoshi said as she slowly sat up and looked at everyone. "I've won," she said, then poofed, revealing to be a clone. Another puff of smoke happened in Tsunade's arms, revealing another clone, causing Tsunade's eyes to widen. "Wait, what?" she said as she stood up and looked around them, but then Temari gasped and pointed at the top of the tower. "Up there," she yelled as Naruto and Tsunade looked at Temari, then turned their gazes to the top of the building, seeing Hoshi with K's now over her left shoulder. "Like I said, you lose, your son is mine now, Tsunade," Hoshi said. Still, she got a surprise kick from Naruto's shadow clone as Hoshi fell to the ground from the tower. Naruto's clone caught K's and landed on the ground safely. Then the clone deactivated, and Tsunade rushed over to K's, picked him up in her arms, and held him tightly. "Oh, my baby boy," Tsunade said as she looked where Hoshi fell, but she slowly got back up, and what the trio saw shocked them. Hoshi is standing there hunched over with her left arm shattered and ready to come off while the rest of her body is falling apart. "Well, so much for sand armor," she said as her remaining forces and some Auto shinobi came to her aid. "Mistress, we must go. The battle is over," said the Auto shinobi while Hoshi nodded in agreement. "Yes, our time here is done. We have given Orochimaru enough time, and my side of the mission has failed," she said as she shine away from her forces and the Auto forces, leaving the trio alone with K's. "We should head back and help the others," Temari said as they were about to go. Tsunade stopped them. "You two find anything you can do to help. I need to get back to the Uchiha district," she said as Naruto and Temari nodded and the trio went their separate ways back in Konoha. Everyone was cheering that they've defeated Hoshi's forces and Auto forces, but it was short-lived when Gaara spoke up. "Don't celebrate just yet, there's still a matter at the stadium to deal with." He started as everyone looked at him. Sakura, Kankuro, Hinata who had to awaken just in time to help out, Kimba, and Kushina as they regrouped with everyone at some point during the battle. "I may be not formed Konoha, but follow these orders. Those who can still fight head for the stadium, but anyone who needs to help others to the hospital do so now," he said as he and his group left to head for the stadium. The Leaf Shinobi followed the orders while only a tiny group of shinobi went with them while the remaining forces stayed and help out anyone who needed the help. Meanwhile in the Uchiha district, Sora, Shizune, Tenten, and Fu had hold off the Auto assault on the district, but a shadow clone of Hoshi was watching the whole battle and smirked. My, another Jinchuriki, how did I miss this one?" she said as she smirked darkly and deactivate to show the original its memories just to feed Hoshi information. "Sora, Fu, Tenten, please stay here and look after everyone," Shizune said as the trio nodded and returned to Tsunade's house to check on the children. Shizune left the district to see if she could find anyone, but all she saw was everyone being treated for medical attention or being taken to the hospital. Then Shizune looked at the stadium and rushed to see if she could help, but she bumped into Gaara and the others heading for the stadium and joined the group. Meanwhile, Rasa and the other Leaf Shinobi were running out of options to remove the stadium's barrier. Rasa noticed Kurora wasn't with him and looked around only to see her near one of the Sound 4 members, but he'll ask her about her actions later as Gaara and his group finally arrive at the stadium. "What's the situation, Rasa?" Kimba asked as everyone else looked at the barrier. "We've tried everything. We even tried to attack those two at the sides. Just nothing was breaking through," he said as Menma was watching from afar in a tree, just smiling at the situation and watching to see just how weak Konoha was. He was planning something that would change his fate. "With Kurora, she is still with Tayuya. And why do I need to show you anything? You're the enemy," Tayuya said as she tried to get Kurora back off her, but Kurora got closer and sat on her knees. "It's honestly just a simple request. I mean you no harm," she said, reassuring her that she wasn't trying anything funny. Then Tayuya scuffed and took off her left forearm band, showing a scar. "How did you get that scar?" Kurora asked curiously as Tayuya just rolled her eyes. "Fine, I'll humor you. I got this scar when I was 3 years old. I was taken away from my family, and from what I was told, my mother tried to save me, but the man who kidnapped me is that snake man fighting the third Hokage," she said. Then she turned her head to Kurora and noticed tears were about to form in her eyes. "Ahem, what else happened? Where did Orochimaru steal you from?" Kurora asked as she looked at Tayuya in her eyes and waited for her to finish her story. "Oh, some sand village," Tayuya said as she slipped back on her left forearm band again. Your scar. You got it from an accident. Karora said as Tayuya sharply turned her head toward Karora, and she seemed annoyed by her. Oh, so you think you know me now? Tayuya said as she smirked, watched the battle, and kept up the barrier. Karora's brain finally clicked. She scooted closer to the small barrier and leaned closer, almost to the barrier. Karora sighed, then she spoke in a soothing and motherly voice, There, sweetie, it was only an accident this time. Your sister didn't mean it. Karora said as her words just got through to Tayuya. She looked at Karora with a raised brow, but Karora's words ran through her head again. Then she looked away and looked at the battle, then she thought back to the day she was kidnapped. Sitting at the family dining table, a young Tayuya was crying from Temari's recent accidental bullying, and Temari was put to bed because of it. Mommy, it hurts, cried a younger Tayuya. Her mother, Karora, was gently holding her daughter's arm and putting on some homemade ointment. Then Tayuya coughed a little. Mommy, it stinks, she said as she covered her nose. It's okay, Tayuya. It's supposed to smell, but it will go away soon. Karora said as she put more on the scar while Tayuya sniffed. When's Daddy coming home, Mommy? Tayuya asked as she looked up at her mother. Not for another hour. I understand that you and Temari want Daddy around more, but he has responsibilities. Karora started as she finished using the ointment on Tayuya's arm. Why did Temari have to be mean to me? Tayuya said as she looked down at the floor, annoyed by her sister's bullying. Karora brushed her hand through Tayuya's hair. There, sweetie, it was only an accident this time. Your sister didn't mean it. Karora said as she picked up Tayuya, but just as she did, Orochimaru burst through the living room window and rushed at Karora, ready to take her down. Karora quickly got up and tried to fight Orochimaru, but he threw some sleeping powder into her face, making Karora stumble. She looked behind her and saw Orochimaru had Tayuya in his arms, and she was screaming and crying. Mommy, she yelled as Karora tried to move, but she collapsed to the floor, slowly closing her eyes from the dust. Karora slowly moved her head to the window where Orochimaru had just come from as Tayuya looked back and screamed. Mommy, Tayuya said, but that was the last time Karora saw Tayuya as she closed her eyes from the sleeping powder. Tayuya covered her mouth with tears streaming down her face and hand as she looked from the battle again and looked at Karora. Mommy, she said softly as Karora nodded at her without hesitation. Tayuya turned off her small barrier and sharply turned around and hugged her mother as she was crying loudly and buried her head into Karora's chest as Karora wrapped her arms around her long-lost daughter. It's okay, you're safe now, Tayuya. You're safe, she said as she rubbed Tayuya's back. Tayuya hugged her mother tightly, not wanting to let go. The barrier was flickering, and everyone was confused. Still, everyone saw a chance to end Orochimaru's assault. Hoshi noticed this and kicked Minato in the stomach, causing him to fly back into a wall within the stands. Then Hoshi turned to Orochimaru. We have to retreat. The barrier is failing, she said as Orochimaru looked around, finding the cause of this, and his eyes locked on Karora and Tayuya. Mother and daughter reunited. How pitiful, he said as he signaled his remaining Sound 4 members to drop the barrier and regroup on him, but Orochimaru did one last thing and lunged at Hiruzen, but he grabbed Orochimaru and used the dead demon consuming seal and he sealed away Orochimaru's arms just as second Hokage had no choice but to stab Hiruzen at the last second, causing everyone to gasp at the sight. Tobirama pulled the blade out of Hiruzen, then Tobirama and Hashirama faded back into the afterlife just before Minato would do anything to the Sound 4, and Orochimaru Menma landed between the group and smirked as he used his chakra to set off some explosive kunai tags, causing a bit of panic and distracting everyone on the stadium as Orochimaru, Menma, and the Sound 4 used this to escape from Konoha as they would be too busy to do anything as of right now. Just as the group left, Temari and Naruto just came back to see Menma's actions, while Tsunade was unaware of what happened on the stadium rooftop as she was back at the Uchiha district and just returned to her home and leaving Kaze's care to Tenten, who had enough action for one day. With the dust settled and everyone confused about Menma's actions, Minato couldn't believe his son would betray Konoha and turn to the dark side. At the same time, Rasa, Kimba, Kushina, Gaara, Kankuro, Temari, Sakura, and Naruto went over to Karora and Tayuya to understand more about what was happening. Still, as soon they got close, Rasa froze and gasped. Tayuya, he said as she broke away from Karora's hug and looked at Rasa. Daddy. Tayuya just started to run for her father, but she got grabbed by two Anbu holding her arms behind her back. "Let me go," she demanded. Just then, Minato appeared in front of her. "You are under arrest and will be executed," he said, but Karora got in the way and grabbed her daughter's arm, pulled her away from the two Anbu and held her tightly in her arms. "My daughter isn't going anywhere, Minato," Karora said with her voice mixed with sadness, anger, and protection for Tayuya. Minato was going to argue, but Gaara, Kankuro, Naruto, and Temari gathered together and stood before their mother and newly returned sister. "Don't you think this village of yours has suffered enough? We don't need any more bloodshed, and don't even think about hurting them," Naruto said as he stood firm, just like Gaara, as Gaara had his sand ready to strike down anyone that came near his family. "I'd take his warning, Lord Fourth. Even if we don't want anything else to happen if you force our hands, we will make you pay," Kankuro said, feeling like he was in no mood for anything else. Minato scuffed at the thread and waved his hand away, signaling his Anbu to back off. "Fine, do as you please," Minato started as he looked at Rasa. "You and your family have 2 hours to leave. If you stay longer, I will have that redhead arrested and executed," he said as he turned away and walked off, leaving everyone in shock or disgusted with Minato's choices as Rasa and his family returned to the Uchiha district along with Kimba and Kushina was ready to give Minato a piece of her mind from his actions. Still, they had to return to check on everyone else as Kimba and Kushina were worried about their other sons. As they left, the Sand siblings looked at their mother and Tayuya. Temari covered her mouth, and her eyes widened. "Tayuya," she said as she rushed over and hugged her sister. "Hey, sis, I've missed you too," Tayuya said as she wrapped her arms around Temari and nuzzled into Temari's right shoulder. It has been 2 hours since the end of Konoha's invasion as Naruto's Sand family, along with Kase, were at the main gates being sought off by Hiruzen, but Naruto and his family aren't the only ones leaving Konoha, as Tsunade is leaving with Naruto and his family along with Shizune and Tenten while Kushina is also leaving to be with her son as she is taking her Uchiha family with her and even Fu is leaving with them as she didn't want to leave Sora's side. Tsunade welcomed Fu with open arms after everything she has done to help to make Fu her third apprentice. "I am sad to see you all go, but it is the right choice you've all have made," Hiruzen said as the others bowed respectfully, as he did to them. "I enjoyed every moment in this village, Hiruzen-sensei," Tsunade said as Kushina nodded in agreement. She felt happy to finally have left the village after everything had happened. "Now you all better get going before Minato shows up and changes his mind," Hiruzen said as everyone else nodded and bid him farewell. Hiruzen, but before the group left, they heard, "Wait." Everyone looked back and saw Sakura with Hinata and Hanabi. They came up to the group and stopped as they caught their breath. We're coming with you," Sakura said as Gaara used his sand to make chairs for the trio. The ground was puzzled. "Are you sure? What about your families?" Temari asked as Hinata spoke up. "We don't care about our families. We aren't staying with a family that seems alright to have their member die," she said. Hanabi nodded in response because she disliked how their clan worked. "And I've told my parents, they agree that Konoha wasn't safe," Sakura said as she panted softly. Then Gaara approached her and picked her up in his arms, carrying her like a princess, causing her to blush. "Oh, my Gaara, you sure do know how to make a girl blush," she said as Gaara smiled at her and then carried her. Kase approached both Hyuga girls, and he picked up Hinata like a princess as she blushed the most and was about to faint. Tenten approached Hanabi and turned her back to her as Tenten kneeled, offering her back. "Want a piggyback ride, Hanabi?" Tenten asked as Hanabi smiled brightly and hopped on her back, wrapping her arms around Tenten's neck and her legs around Tenten's waist. "You bet you're the best for piggyback rides," Hanabi said with a smile and nuzzled her head against Tenten's back. Tenten got off her knee and started walking. The others followed too, as they bid farewell to Hiruzen again and took their journey back home, but from within the trees, Hoshi was watching them and stalking her prayer as she wanted that power from Naruto, Kase, and Gaara. Still, she is biding her time to do so and doesn't want to mess up her new plan after wandering the group that had set up camp all day. The only ones who went to bed were Hanabi, Yuki, and Yuma, while the others stayed up chatting. Then Tenten heard something snap. She quickly got up and readied her nunchucks while talking to Fu. She also stood up and turned to the others. "Hey, someone is coming," she said as the others got up and joined them. Kushina went to Hanabi, Yuki, and Yuma's tent and stayed with them to protect them. At the same time, the others waited and saw who was coming towards them, but it was an unexpected visit from Hoshi. As the group kept their guard up, Hoshi stopped where she was and crossed her arms. "I'm not here for a fight. I'm here to talk with the Kazekage," she said. Everyone was a little stunned by this except Naruto and Gaara. This sudden situation made them feel like something was off, and Rasa stepped forward. "What would you like to disguise about?" he said as Hoshi looked at him. "Not here," she started, then pointed to the placed-out medium boulder and 2 rocks on each side. "We talk over there. I'd imagine you'd bring someone with you." "I understand that," she said as she walked over to the setting, sat on one of the rocks and waited patiently for Rasa. Then Rasa looked at Kimba. "We better see what she wants," he said as Kimba slightly nodded and followed Rasa over to the boulder. As they approached, a few of Hoshi's shinobi fled the scene so they didn't think it was a trap. Rasa sat on the other rock, looking at Hoshi with a preteen girl beside her. Kimba stood beside Rasa. "Alright, what is it you want, Hoshi?" Rasa said while Kimba crossed his arms, remained silent, and listened. "Oh good, straight to the point." Hoshi started, and then she took a piece of paper and showed it to Rasa. "I went to see the Sand Daimyo a month before Konoha's invasion, and I need your permission to let me and my people take over and live in the ruined city of Rorin," she said as she crossed her arms and waited for Rasa's response. Rasa looked over the papers, and it's genuine as he sighed as he noticed that Hoshi wishes to have a truce. It didn't look good as it had been ordered from Sand Daimyo himself, and Rasa had to accept one request. "I shall agree that you and your people will have Rorin." Rasa started, as he didn't like to say what came next. "Now, what is your request to have this truce?" he asked as Kimba noticed Rasa's mixed expressions and hoped it wouldn't be a request they wouldn't like. Then Hoshi cleared her throat, getting Kimba's attention as Rasa tried to prepare what she had to say. "I would like blood samples from 2 of your sons and K's." Hoshi said as the young girl beside her smirked and crossed her arms while Rasa and Kimba had mixed facial expressions. Fine," Rasa started, then looked at Kimba. "Please bring Naruto, Gaara, and K's here," he said as Kimba had no choice but to agree and went to get them. While waiting, Rasa looked back at Hoshi and had his arms crossed. "While we wait, I would like to know what you and your clan are," he said. Hoshi smirked as she cleared her throat, and the girl sat on the ground with her legs and arms crossed. "This is going to be fun. Mother's storytimes are best," the girl said, surprising Rasa a little now. Knowing the girl is Hoshi's mother, "We are the Celestial Guardians. We are a mystical and powerful race hailing from a distant galaxy known as Astra Prime. We are a species of beings with celestial energy flowing through their veins, granting them immense powers and abilities beyond human comprehension." Hoshi started as her daughter rested her head on her mother's left thigh. At the same time, Rasa listened carefully. "We celestial guardians are ethereal beings with luminous, iridescent skin that shimmers like the night sky. We possess elegant, elongated features in our eyes that reflect the vastness of space itself. Glowing, intricate patterns of constellations adorn their bodies, symbolizing our connection to the celestial realm. Our presence exudes a sense of otherworldly grace and power," Hoshi said as they were interrupted by Kimba, who had returned with Naruto, Gaara, and K's. Hoshi smirked as she saw the boys, and then Hoshi's daughter saw them and blushed the moment she saw Naruto. Hoshi's daughter kept tugging at her mother's leg as Hoshi looked down at her. "What is it, Hisui?" Hoshi asked as she followed her daughter's gaze, then she smiled and petted her daughters. "Got an interest in Naruto, do you, sweetie?" she said as Hisui nodded. Her eyes were glued to Naruto, and her lips were slightly parted. Hisui crawled away from her mother and sat on her butt to the ground again and looking up at Naruto with a creepy smile on her face making the group uncomfortable. Suddenly, Hoshi cleared her throat, getting the group's attention while Naruto couldn't help but glance down at Hisui once a while. "Now then, I assume you told them why they are here, Mr. Uchiha?" she asked, but Kimba shook his head. "I only said Rasa requested their presence. It is that, or you will have 2 angry mothers coming for you," he said as he pointed from his right, referring to Kurora and Kushina. Hoshi looking their way and scoffed. "Fair point," she said, having no choice but to agree with him. Hoshi looked away and looked at the 3 boys as she explained why she needed them there, but once explained, the trio crossed their arms and gritted their teeth. "We got no choice in the matter then. Gaara said as Hoshi smirked darkly and shook her head at them. Now back to what I was saying, ah. Yes, eons ago, a great cosmic threat known as the Void Devourer emerged, seeking to consume all the stars and planets in its path. In a desperate bid to protect our home, we celestial guardians embarked on a perilous journey across the cosmos, eventually arriving on Earth as a haven to regroup and plan our defense against the Void Devourer. Hoshi started as she took a small breath before continuing. She looked at her daughter and smiled as Hisui still looked up at Naruto from the ground. Her smile was bright and creepy, and Hisui was slowly making grabby hands, wanting Naruto badly. Naruto slowly tries to escape Hisui, but she follows him very quickly. Then Hoshi says, "Now, we belong to the esteemed Moonlight Seraph clan, known for our mastery of lunar magic and healing arts. The Moonlight Seraphs harness the energy of the moon to heal wounds, cleanse dark energies, and bestow blessings of rejuvenation upon allies. Our abilities also include manipulating light and shadow, allowing them to ward off evil forces and balance the spiritual energies around us." Hoshi started seeing that the group was paying attention but couldn't help but chuckle that Naruto was comically running away from Hisui as she was giving chase to Naruto. Hoshi then started to speak again. "I possess a rare gift within my clan, the ability to commune with celestial beings and channel their wisdom and power. As a young celestial guardian, I trained diligently to hone her skills and fulfill her destiny as a beacon of hope and light in the face of darkness. So, in short, to everything I said, Lord Kazekage, we are the last of our kind," she said as Rasa tried to process everything he was told. Hoshi stood up, then she went over to the boys and used 3 syringes to take blood samples from Naruto, Gaara, and Kaze. Having a smirk on her face, Hoshi was happy that she got what she wanted even though she couldn't capture them. "Now then, there is one more thing before this truce is official, Lord Kazekage," Hoshi said as she turned around and put each vialed tube in her pocket. Then she looked at Rasa. "What is this one more thing you want, Hoshi?" Rasa asked as Hisui jumped on her mother's back and smiled. "I want to be part of Sunagakure," she said, causing Naruto to hunch over, his jaw wide open, and his eyes widened while the others just their jaws wide open, and their eyes widened. "Why do you wish to be part of our village, Hisui, was it?" Kimba asked as Hisui nodded with a smile. "I want to know what it's like to be human, and I picked Karora as my human mother for the time being," she said as Rasa felt like he was going to have a heart attack learning this. "Why my wife out of all of the other women in Suna?" Rasa asked, as he wanted to know the reason for this request. "Oh, I saw how she spoke to that redhead girl back in Konoha. I was watching the lovely chaos until I saw the moment of mother and daughter, and I want my daughter to know what's that like," Hisui said as Rasa looked at Hoshi. "Why can't you look after her?" he said as he looked like he wanted to run. "We don't know how to look after our young. This will be the first time one of our own will be looked after, and as long she's with Suna, I won't attack you or any other villages within the Land of Wind," Hoshi said as Rasa sighed and wasn't sure what to do. Even Kimba wasn't sure as he knew no one had looked after an alien before, but Rasa spoke up as he wrote down his name on the document. "Alright, you got your truce, but this truce is over if you go back on your word, Hoshi," he said as Hoshi nodded and took the documents. Then she turned and looked at her daughter. "Now you behave and don't be a brat to them, Hisui," she said as Hisui got off her mother's back and nodded. Then she looked at her adoptive father just as Hoshi teleported away, heading for Rorin, but no one noticed a dark, sinister smirk on Hoshi's lips. Then Hisui looked at Rasa and hopped on the boulder, her legs crossed. "So, do I call you daddy, father, or something?" she asked in a playful tone as Kimba couldn't help but try not to snicker. "You have to earn your place to call me that, Hisui. It is Lord Kazekage for you, and in time, if you have earned our trust and respect, you'll call you family," he said as Hisui's face lit up and hopped off the boulder. "You got it," she said as the group turned to walk back to camp. Hisui suddenly hopped on Naruto's back. Hee, don't think I forgot about you, big brother number 3. She giggled as everyone else was a little stunned, but Naruto sighed and just gave up as he placed his hands on her thighs and adjusted Hisui and gave her a piggyback ride back. "There's no use fighting you anyway," he said as Hisui wrapped her arms around his neck and nuzzled her head on Naruto's left shoulder. As the group returned, the others were surprised at what was on Naruto's back. Temari had her arms crossed, and her eyes narrowed, and she felt too jealous of the girl on Naruto's back. Karora is the first to speak up before Tamari can speak. "Dear, who is that? And what did Hoshi want?" she asked as Rasa and Kimba had worried expressions. "It's a long story. Karora and Hoshi wanted a truce. She and her people got the old city of Roran, and in return, she wanted Naruto, Gaara, and Kaze's blood." Rasa stopped as he saw Karora, Kushina, and Tsunade standing up and her red glowing eyes, and the three were gritting their teeth. "Karora, Kushina, Tsunade, please calm down and hear us out," Kimba said as he was trying to calm the three of them before they thought of finding Hoshi and beating her up. They calmed down and listened to what Rasa had to say next. Rasa turned to his boys and Kaze. "Would you three please go to bed? I don't think you want to see what will happen next," he said as the boys headed off to their tents while Naruto got Hisui off his back. Then Rasa placed his hand on her shoulder, stopping her from looking at him. "What? I didn't do anything wrong. Apart from chasing Naruto," she said and giggled. She was just causing Tamari to be pissed off at her. "You're staying with Tayuya and Hinata in their tents," he said as Hisui sighed and pouted. Fine. Whatever you say, Lord Kazekage," she said as she followed Tayuya to their tent. Then Tayuya returned to her family once Hisui went inside to get changed and get into bed. As soon Tayuya got back, she saw Tamari wasn't as happy as she looked at their father. "Daddy, why do we have that girl with us?" Tamari asked as she had her eyes narrowed and her arms crossed. Then Tayuya came up behind her sister and hugged her. "Come on, sis, I'm sure Daddy has a reason, and we should hear him out, okay?" she said as Tamari looked over her left shoulder and sighed as she patted her sister's arm and Tayuya let go of her. Then Tamari back at their father as Rasa explained the situation, and everyone else had mixed opinions. "As much we're taking in an alien being, Daddy, I just don't feel comfortable being around her or the way she wants my Naruto," Tamari said as she walked off, heading towards hers and Naruto's tent. She went inside it and lay down next to Naruto. "I don't feel comfortable looking after someone else's daughter, and remember who tried to take our sons away," Karora said as she didn't know what to do. "I know how you all feel, but it was Hisui's idea to see what it's like to be human and be raised by a family," Rasa said as the others looked at each other and then looked back at Rasa and Kimba. "Alright, we'll sleep on it, Rasa. Give us time to think about it," Tsunade said as everyone nodded in agreement. They turned in for the night and got some sleep before continuing their journey the following day. But Tayuya stayed up and took the first watch. Just a few hours until morning, Hisui got up first and slowly crawled out of the tent. Then, she stood up, cracked her back, and did a few stretches. "Tents are nice and all, but I hope there's a nice bed in Suna," she said. Then she saw Tayuya sitting on a boulder, and judging by her body language, she was asleep. As Hisui looked puzzled, she looked around. "Well, nothing seems to be missing," she said as she went over to Tayuya and gently placed her hand on Tayuya's back. She saw that she was sleeping and felt cold. "Oh Kami. She went to sleep without even having a blanket around her," she said as she sighed and shook her head. Then she gently picked her up with ease and carried Tayuya just like holding a kid in her arms. Hisui giggled, seeing how Tayuya had her head on her shoulder, and she walked back to Hinata's tent. Tamari had just woken up and poked her head out, then she looked to see Hisui returning with Tayuya. Is she okay? Not accusing you or anything, but you didn't do anything to her?" she said as Hisui stopped with her right arm under Tayuya's butt and her left hand on her hip. "Well, that's a little hurtful," she started and giggled. "No, I didn't do anything to her. She's sleeping. I'm just bringing her to her tent," she said as Hisui gently got on her knees, and both Hisui and Tamari looked at each other for a moment. "Mind helping me?" she asked as Tamari nodded and went over to help. She went inside the tent. Tamari reached out and got Tayuya by her back and slowly got herself and Tayuya inside the tent while Hisui still had Tayuya's legs and gently helped Tamari. Then Hisui passed Tayuya's legs to her. Tamari tucked Tayuya into her futon that Hisui was sleeping in last night. Hisui remained sitting on her knees for a minute, and then Tamari poked her head out of the tent and looked at Hisui. "How is that futon cold? You were sleeping in it?" she asked in awe and puzzled as Hisui titled her head at her question. "Oh, that would be my body temperature. I sweat a lot, and my body soaks the futon, and for about 3 minutes, it makes it feel like the futon has been left in the cold," she said. Tamari had her jaw open as she didn't know what to say. I got nothing," Tamari said as she slowly came out of the tent and stood up, followed by Hisui, She finally got off her knees and appeared to be a couple of inches taller than Tamari, and then Hisui giggled. I didn't want to worry everyone last night without saying, but my mother made me out of Kagami crystal and ice. She said as Tamari's jaw dropped to the ground and her eyes wide enough to come out of her head. How have you not hurt Tayuya? Tamari asked, but Hisui gave her an honest answer and shrugged. Beats me. Anyway, I want to do something nice and cook you all breakfast. Hisui said as Tamari looked at her for a minute. Sure, I'll help you pick out what you need, Tamari said as Hisui smiled at her. They both went over to their supplies and noticed they didn't have enough. Huh? Tamari started as she was puzzled, while Hisui had an innocent expression. What's the matter, Tamari? Hisui asked as she was holding a bag of spring onions. We should have enough food here for a few days, she said as she looked around and noticed a couple of their food boxes were tipped over. Then, the two gazed at the trail of eaten fruit leading to a fox den. Tamari put her hands on her hips, and Hisui crossed her arms. Well, that explains it, Hisui said as she looked at Tamari. Tamari looked a little annoyed and sighed. Hey, I know. Hisui started as Tamari looked at her. Let's try fishing. I have always wanted to try it, but I don't know how it works, she said as Tamari smiled a little. Sure, I'll teach you, and then we'll cook what gets caught, she said. Hisui was happy to hear that as the two cleaned up after the foxes. Once done, Hisui and Tamari left a note for the group as they managed to put away what food was left in a safer place so the foxes or other animals wouldn't get it. They picked up their fishing rods and went to a small nearby river. Is finishing as easy as more people say? Hisui asked as she stayed close to Tamari, and Tamari thought about it. Well, it depends on how good you are at fishing, so it's more of a yes or no question, Tamari said as they smiled at each other and chatted. After about 10 minutes, they both arrived at the river. The two took their sandals off then. Tamari rolled up her pants legs, but Hisui wore shorts, so she was okay. Then Hisui took her first step into the water and hugged herself. Wow, this water is freezing, she said as she shivered, and Tamari giggled at her. Just curious, Hisui, just how long ago did Hoshi make you? She said as she stepped into the river. She was shivering too, but not as much as Hisui. Mother made me about. She started thinking about it for a minute, then looked at Tamari. About 3 weeks ago, she said as Tamari was slightly surprised and dumbfounded. She cleared her throat. That old? And you're a preteen. Hisui nodded. Well, that's very advanced, but I'm sure mother would teach you anything she knows, just like I'm teaching you to fish. Tamari said as Hisui smiled and stood next to Tamari, listening to her carefully about how to fish. Meanwhile, back at camp, Kurora woke up along with Tsunade and Kushina. That's odd. I wonder where Tayuya went. Tsunade said as she and Kurora scanned around, but they were joined by Kushina, who found the note that Tamari had written. Tamari and Hisui have gone fishing, and Tayuya is in her tent, she said as she showed the note to them. The two had different reactions to the note. Tsunade had her hands on her hips with a curious expression, while Kurora had her arms crossed and a worried expression. So we had some fox raiders, did we? Tsunade said as she looked around and noticed the fox den nearby. Kurora decided to check on them both. I'm sure they're fine, Kurora. Your daughter is the strongest girl in Suna, Kushina said as she smiled reassuringly. I know that, but I need to know how they are getting on with each other. Tamari wasn't that pleased. Remember, Kurora said as she walked off to the river to find them while Kushina and Tsunade watched her go and went around to clear up what they needed to put away before they had to move on for Suna. I have thought about it if that girl doesn't cause problems. I'm alright with Hisui being around us. Kushina said as she had a soft smile on her face. I'm still skeptical of her, but I'm on the same boat as you, Kushina, Tsunade said as they continued to get things ready to pack up. At the river, Tamari was annoyed that Hisui had more catches than her, with Tamari having only caught 5 fish while Hisui had 20+ giant tuna fish. Honestly, I didn't know this planet had fish this big, sis. Hisui said as she threw the tuna fish over to their catch. She was about to throw her line into the river but stopped, covered her mouth, and looked at Tamari. Sorry, it just slipped out, Tamari, she said, trying to be apologetic, but Tamari waved the hand. It's fine if it slips out. It slips out. I'm mostly jealous of your catch, she said as they both looked at the fish that Hisui had caught, then looked at each other and then they started laughing with each other. I guess you're. Honestly, I wasn't expecting this much fish. she said as she showed a smile, being proud of herself. Don't get it too proud, and I'm sure mom has plans for you just to see how good you are at knowing things. Tamari said as Hisui nodded, I honestly don't mind. I want to learn new things, even if it means going to Suna's academy. She said as they fished for one last bite while just behindhand them and stood next to the catch, and also just arrived was Karora, who was watching them and seeing how they get on. She even heard what they both sighed after they looked away from the fish. So, think anyone is awake at the camp yet? Hisui started as Tamari looked at her with a puzzling expression and a raised brow. Because I am hoping no one is awake, and I don't want them to worry that you're with me and think I do something to you. Hisui said as she felt worried that others might mistake her for a kidnapper since Tamari was with her. It's alright, I'll vouch for you, and to be honest, I am willing to give you a chance to be in this family, but remember, our family pulls their height around the house, she said as Hisui smiled and hugged her tightly. Tamari was surprised by this. Then, for a few seconds, Tamari hugged her back. After 10 minutes, Hisui and Tamari spent a little time chatting and catching enough fish. There, I think this would be the last one, and we should be getting back, Tamari said as Hisui smiled. I agree. Hisui stopped as she looked back at the fish they caught and was shocked. Tamari noticed this and followed her gaze, and they finally noticed that Karora was watching them. Mommy, what are you doing here? Tamari said as she was a little shocked while Karora giggled. Watching over my girls, she said as Karora had put away their fish for the past 10 minutes. She watched them as the two girls approached Karora and stood close to her. Your girls, Tamari said, feeling slightly puzzled, the same as Hisui, who had her arms crossed and looked puzzled. Yes, my girls, I also thought about it, and I'm willing to give you a chance, Hisui, and Tamari is right. We pull our weight in this family, she said as Karora stood up. Hisui hugged. Thank you, she yelled. Karora was slightly surprised for a few moments, then she smiled and gently hugged Hisui back. Karora rubbed Hisui. Alright, time to head back before the others get worried, she said. Hisui and Tamari smiled as Hisui walked over to the two giant tuna fish. I'll take these two, she said as she lifted them quickly, surprising Karora and Tamari. Wow, Tamari said in shock as she picked up a heavy sack of fish while Karora carried a medium full bag of fish. They walked back together, returning to the camp while chatting. After a few minutes of traveling back, they saw the others gathered around and chatting peacefully. Then they noticed them coming back and waving, but a few others were shocked to see how strong Hisui was, carrying two giant fish, as they reached the group and put down the fish. Well, I guess this is more than enough for our journey back, Karora said while Hisui and Tamari looked at each other, smiling and giggling. About half an hour later, everyone had a simple Japanese breakfast with one giant tuna being eaten. The rest of what Hisui and Tamari had cached was put into a storage scroll with the rest of their remaining food for the journey as everyone had a good meal and started packing up their stuff and ready to head for Suna on the fourth day morning through the sands of the land of wind. The group were packing up their equipment and to making sure they didn't forget anything before making to Suna, with it being half a day's reach. Has everyone packed everything? Karora asked nicely, and the response was either a nod from some or a yes from the others, as they didn't want a repeat of yesterday's incident where they thought they packed everything only to forget some equipment and accidentally left Tayuya behind, who wasn't amused when they came back for her, but she was mostly forgiving her mother and understanding how stressful it is for setting up their equipment and putting it away again. But the incident caused them an extra day to get back to Suna. But as they were walking, the group minus the twins sensed someone had been following them since their second day trip and had been following them since then, as the group had been keeping their guard up, but mostly Kushina, who is worried for her twin sons and hopes whoever or whatever is following them would leave them alone in peace and nothing hostile. But the group were happy and smiling away, even chatting and planning what they'll do in Suna. But a sandstorm soon arrived as the ground calmly looked around, hoping to find some cave or shelter. Hey, over there, Tayuya yelled as she pointed to an abandoned stone cabin, but the group had no time to be sure it was safe. They went over to it, but Tayuya and Tamari rushed over to double check if it was safe as they searched outside. It seems good enough to stand this storm out, Tayuya said as Tamari nodded. I agree. Let's check inside first, too, Tamari said as Tayuya nodded back. The two sisters went inside and stayed at each other's side as they carefully searched the cabin. This place looks like it's been here for over 50 years, Tamari said as Tayuya found a fireplace and noticed some logs beside it. Tayuya set up a fire while Tamari signaled their family and friends to join them, as the place was big enough for the group to rush to them. They stayed outside for a minute longer, ensuring they got everyone with them. Once everyone had entered the cabin, Tamari slammed the door shut, causing a sign to fall off from the top frame to land on the sanding, and said, "Danger. Keep out." Then it got covered up by the sandstorm. "How long do you think this storm will last?" Kaze asked as he looked at the adults to find out the answer to his question. "It might be gone within a few hours, then we'll have a nice couple hours to walk back to Suna," Rasa said as he and Kimba took a window each other to be sure they were safe while the others set up where they would put their stuff for the time being. Still, Kaze and Naruto looked worried as Hinata sat on Kaze's lap and rested her head on his chest. It was the same with Tamari, but she only had Naruto on her lap. He's getting used to it, but Tamari notices Naruto and Kaze's unease and worry expressions as she looks at Kaze and then at Naruto. "What's the matter, my sand prince?" she asked as Naruto snapped out of this trance and blushed at his new nickname. "Oh, it's nothing, Tamari, just a bad feeling, that's all," he said as his words caught the attention of the others. They were keeping their guards up, and even Kushina kept her guard up the most as she had her youngest twin sons on her lap and they were napping with their heads resting on her chest. Naruto cupped Temari's cheek and rubbed it with his thumb, causing her to relax a bit, and smiled at him. "Just be careful, Naruto. The last thing I want is to lose you," she said as Naruto kissed her lips and kissed him back for a few seconds, then pulled away. "You'll lose me, Tamari. We're together until we die," he said as he kissed her cheek. She smiled at him, leaned her head on his chest and nuzzled Naruto while the others found it sweet. Hinata was doing the same thing with Kaze as they cuddled up to each other, but their moment was ruined when Hanabi sat on Hinata's lap and rested her head on Kaze's chest, and the two looked puzzled and giggled with each other. "Geez, Hanabi, you don't fully trust me yet, do you?" he said as Hanabi looked up at him with a smile and shook her head. "I trust you. I'm just messing with you both." She giggled and rested her head on Kaze again, followed by Hinata, tired from the walking. Both sisters had fallen asleep, followed by some of the others who took a nap, but only Kimba, Rasa, Naruto, Kaze, and Sora stayed awake to keep their guard up, and even Sora had Fu on his lap as the two had gotten close since the end of Konoha's invasion as Fu was snoring softly. Her small breath tickled Sora's neck, causing him to blush and try not to laugh to wake her or anyone around them. Still, suddenly, Sora felt a draft next to him and noticed a hidden cave behind a fake boulder as he gently got up with Fu in his arms. Still, he went over to his mother and placed Fu next to her, allowing Fu to rest her head on Kushina's right arm simply. Kushina looked puzzled as she looked at her stepson. "Sora sweetie, what's the matter?" she asked as a few others noticed this. "I think that the boulder other is fake. I felt a big draft from it," he said as Naruto got up from Temari's lap and went over to help Sora remove the fake boulder. Once it did, a big gust of wind came from the tunnel. Then, once the wind stopped, Sora and Naruto kneeled and looked down. "What do you two see?" Kimba asked as he pulled out a kunai just in case. "Just darkness," Sora said, and then Naruto noticed the frame. "And it's covered in webs," he said as the girls started to panic a little. "As much as I don't want you two to go anywhere near it, and Kimba and I would have gone through it, that's too small for us," Rasa said as Kaze looked at his mother and then at Naruto and Sora. "I'm going with you too," he said, but then Tsunade looked at her son with her arms crossed and a stern expression. "You aren't going anywhere. I'm not going to lose you 3 times, Kaze," she said, but Kaze ignored her, and he quickly picked up both Hinata and Hanabi and placed them on her lap. "Sorry, Mom. Yell at me later," he said as Tsunade was dumbfounded. Kaze first went into the tunnel, ripped off a sleeve, wrapped it around a thick stick, and then used his fire jutsu to light it. Followed, but Sora and Naruto explore the tunnel, curious where it leads. After what felt like forever, Sora, Kaze, and Naruto continued to go down the tunnel, which was getting more challenging as the spider webs got thicker and thicker. "It's a good thing you made that torch, Kaze," Sora said as he was in the middle of them both and getting annoyed by how thick the tunnel was with the webs. "I agree, the torch is convenient, and these webs don't feel like normal webs," Naruto said as he took a tiny bit of the web with 3 fingers and looked at it, but he didn't know what these webs were. Naruto then dropped the webs and kept following Kaze and Sora. "I honestly have a bad feeling about this," Kase said as Sora and Naruto stopped and looked at Kase's back. You're saying this now? They both said in unison, but they continued to follow Kase down the tunnel. The webs were getting thicker and thicker. I feel like all these webs were put here for a reason, Sora said as both Naruto and Kase nodded in agreement. Still, after 10 minutes, they finally got through the web tunnel and out of the other side to find an underground cavern. The walls were covered in gems and jewels that amazed the trio. Just be careful here. The ground looks slippy and sticky, Kase said as he looked down to see the webs were making them stick around. But then Naruto and Sora noticed this and moved their feet too much to cause vibrations through the webs, signaling the owner of the lair. "Ah man, Temari's going to kill me. These sandals were a gift from her last year," Naruto said as both Sora and Kase looked at him. "Seriously, you're worried about some sandals than worrying about what could be down here," Kase said as they suddenly stayed quiet and heard something or someone moaning and groaning from one of the tunnels before them. "There is seriously something in this cavern," Sora said as he slowly walked backwards, wanting to leave the cavern. Kase and Naruto agreed as they walked backwards for the exit. "Who dares enter my lair?" The voice roared throughout the cavern, making the trio freeze in place, and their faces went so pale they could be mistaken as yokai as they slowly walked back for the exit, but the voice roared again. "Who is in my lair," said the voice as it was coming from the tunnel to their right, and the trio's eyes opened wide and saw a shadow of the creature. As it was getting closer and the shadow was getting smaller and smaller, integrating that it was getting closer to the tunnel's entrance, but the trio could only watch as they are stuck and can't move their feet, but they try to move again and they slowly getting back to the tunnel they came back into, but the creature stopped walking and is now standing at the tunnel entrance, standing at 6 feet tall and has its hands above its head and gripping the top frame of the tunnel, causing the trio to stop and look back only to see horror and fear. The creature turns out to be a woman with silk back-length black hair. Her body is athlete and slender, wearing a black and red kimono with a white obi belt with 6 spider limbs on her back, and has black chains around her body as she scans the room to find who had entered her lair, but her ruby blood eyes had lay upon Naruto, Sora, and Kase, who were scared to almost death just looking at her. Who is that?" Kase asked as Naruto shook his head. "No idea. I've never seen her before," Naruto said, but then they both looked at Sora, who was sweating bullets down his head and neck, and he looked like he had seen 3 ghosts at once. That's Jorogumo, the woman spider," he said as he had his jaw wide open and his eyes looked like they wanted to leave his head. Both Naruto and Kase looked at Jorogumo after they heard her cackling with laughter, and then she stopped and looked at the trio. "I am so flattered that someone knows about my legend. I feel so special," she said with a dark smirk that put icicles down their spines. Then Jorogumo started walking again and towards Naruto, Kase, and Sora. They stood their ground but were still scared that they'd never met someone like her. Then she stopped before the trio and looked down at them with red-blooded eyes. "Now, how is it you know of me, young one? I am curious," she asked. Even though she could tell that Sora was scared, Sora found the strength and courage to speak. "My mother tells me stories about you and my mother tells me if I wasn't good or misbehaved, she said you would come for me while I sleep," he explained as he was too scared to speak anymore and slowly backed away from her and stood next to his step-brother Naruto. Parents are very smart these days with stories like that," Jorogumo said, chuckling. She stopped chuckling and looked at them. She sniffed the air, getting their scent. My, there's more than 3 of you," she said. Then Jorogumo licked her black lips, scaring the trio. "Wah. What are you going to do with us?" Kase asked, and then Naruto and Sora both sharply looked at him. "Stop saying things that's just going to jinx us," Naruto said as Jorogumo just chuckled once more, causing Naruto and Kase to look at her once more as Jorogumo just stood there with her arms at her stomach. "Why, I only wish to see the surface again. But alas, I am sealed in this craven," she started as the others listened and also puzzled of her works. "I was sealed down here over 200 years ago. I was once a mortal, but my greed led me to dark magic, and I became what you see before you," she said as the trio was unsure if she was telling the truth. Then they looked at each other and then back at her. "If you're saying what is true, then how would you leave?" Sora asked as Naruto and Kase didn't want to ask just in case she was lying and just wanted to break free from her prison. "Oh, you just need these," she started as she handed over 3 small statues of herself in her current form. With these I will be able to follow you anywhere you go," she said as the trio looked at the small Jorogumo statues while secretly Jorogumo was darkly smirking that she's finally going to be free of her prison. She quickly hid it as the trio looked back up at her. "These can't be the other things that keep you here?" Naruto said as the other two were wondering the same thing. "You're very observant," she started, then turned toward the center and pointed at the pillar. "That pillar is the only thing keeping me here. If it was destroyed, then I can leave here freely," she said as the trio looked at each other and were worried what they'd do was right. Sora wasn't sure and looked from the statue, and then they looked back up at Jorogumo. What would happen if we free you?" he asked, and even Naruto and Kazekage looked at Sora and then up at Jorogumo again. "Why, I get to be free and do as I please, but for being the ones who freed me, I honestly promise I will never harm you or your loved ones or other mortals," she said as the trio looked at each other then at the pillar. Sora looked back up at her. "Well, okay, we'll free you, and you keep to your promise," he said as she nodded in agreement. She stood back a bit, feeling that they were ready to free her as the trio stood next to each other and used a fire-style jutsu to blast the pillar, breaking it into one. This freed Jorogumo as chakra chains blinked several times, then vanished. Then Jorogumo did some stretches and cracked some of her limbs. "Ah, free at least," she said as she looked at their free. Then she snapped her fingers from her left hand, and her silk webs devolved, leaving the trio puzzled as they looked at their feet and then looked back up at her. "What?" She started with all of her 4 spider limbs and her hands are on her hips and looking at them being a bit puzzled herself. "Couldn't let my saviors be trapped in my webs. That wouldn't be nice of me," she said as she waited for them to show her the way out. Then Naruto cleared his throat. "Well, I guess you can follow us for the way out," he said. Jorogumo smiled softly and then nodded as she followed them. Kazekage retook the lead while Naruto was in the middle. This time, while Sora was at the back but unknown to them, Jorogumo smirked darkly, eyeing Sora as she sensed a kind soul within him and planned to make Sora her vessel. After what felt like forever again, the group returned to the others. Kazekage came out first and then was grabbed by his mother and pulled into her arms, followed by Naruto. Temari, Kurora, and Kushina pulled Naruto into a giant, non-breathing hug as he got caught. Fu pulled Sora into a hug. Then Kushina let go of Naruto and hugged Sora. "I was so worried about you both," Kushina said as Naruto and Sora smiled. Hinata and Hanabi were about to hug Kazekage but were frozen in place the moment Jorogumo came out of the tunnel and slowly walked over to Tsunade and Kazekage and clung to them, causing Tsunade to look down at them and then looked at the tunnel. She was standing before everyone. It was their first meeting with Jorogumo, who was surprised to see more shinobi. My, I see I have more than 3 visitors," she said as Rasa slowly stepped forward and stood 15 feet away from her. "Who are you?" he asked as Jorogumo smirked a little. "I am Jorogumo, the last of the yokai, and I was freed by 3 kind-hearted shinobi," she said. Everyone was shocked except for Naruto, Kazekage, and Sora, and then Rasa looked at all 3 of them. "You freed one of the most dangerous yokai of all time," he said as the trio was going to speak up. But Jorogumo spoke first. "I made a deal with them that I wouldn't go after their loved ones or cause any harm to other mortals," she said as Rasa looked back up at her. Then, she explained the miniature statues and how her limitations caused them. "But since I am the last of my kind, and if each statue breaks, I shall be no more," she said, showing a creepy, reassuring smile toward them all. Rasa felt off and thought for a minute, but Kurora spoke up. "If you say you keep your word, just know we will have you observed 24/7, she said as Jorogumo nodded in agreement. Then she looked out the window, seeing the sandstorm still happening. Then she snapped her fingers, and it disappeared, surprising everyone as they had their eyes on the window and then back at her. "How did you do that?" Hinata asked as she stayed close to Tsunade and hid her sister between her and Tsunade's legs. "Oh, my magic made the storm in the first place. It's a defense, and if anyone were too close to this old place, they'd be trapped here until I would notice," she explained, explaining the sandstorm. Jorogumo walked past them all calmly and in a friendly manner, continuing to have her arms crossed at her stomach, but just as she got to the door, she looked back at them. "Well, are you coming outside?" she said as everyone looked at each other and then back at her. They followed her outside the old building, and she seemed to know where she was going. "Where are you leading us?" Tamari said as she hadn't lowered her guard and kept Naruto closed behind her. Jorogumo looked back at them. "Oh, I'm not taking you anywhere. I merely suggested going outside," she said as she turned away with a dark smirk. She left the building and stood outside for the first time in over 200 years. My, such a sandy place," she said as she stepped aside from the door, letting the others out as they saw that the old place was close to the village, only half an hour away from it. "So much has changed," she started, then looked around. "It feels so wired. And I remember this place used to be a forest too," she said as the others were surprised that the land of wind wasn't always this windy and sands. As she looked at the group, whose eyes widened and their jaws dropped after a minute of staring at Jorogumo, Kimba broke the silence. "Ahem, anyway, we should get going," he said as everyone nodded, then walked together and headed towards Suna. Half an hour later, the group finally reached Suna and were greeted by their shinobi gate guards. They were confused about the group that came back as they'd seen them leave as a small group to come back with a bigger group, but they let everyone pass. The group split up as Kimba, Tsunade, and Jorogumo followed Rasa towards the Kazekage manor. In contrast, the others went toward the home of the Kazekage family as they waited for the others to return to give the new commoners a place to live and what jobs they would revive from Rasa. As the group settled in, Tamari dragged Naruto back to their room for some alone time. Still, Kurora got their attention first as they looked back down the stairs. "Just remember we are going through some rules for you two to follow, okay?" she said as her son and daughter groaned. "We promise not to do anything other than cuddle and snuggle. But kissing is our way, okay, Mom?" Tamari said, feeling a little annoyed at her mother, but they both understood her worries for them. Kurora giggled at them and smiled softly at them. "Just behave in your relationship, okay?" she said. Then she walked away from the stairs, heading into the kitchen to fix dinner for everyone. "Okay, Mom," Naruto and Tamari said in unison as they entered Temari's room. They both lay next to each other on the bed. Tamari had her head on Naruto's chest, and the two cuddled up to each other and rested their eyes. After everyone had fully rested and the couples all cuddled up to each other, even Hanabi was snuggling up with Hinata and Kase sitting between them and resting her head on Kase, making Hinata awed at her sister but also a little jealous that she was sleeping on Kase. Kurora called everyone for dinner. Still, a few others were out cold sleeping as everyone else went over to the dining table, and then Kase approached Kurora after he left Hanabi on the couch to sleep. "Kurora-sensei, what about the others? Some are napping, and Lord Kazekage hasn't returned yet with the others," he said as Kurora softly smiled at him. "It's alright, there are leftovers in the kitchen. I'll just need to heat it once they've awakened and the others return from the Kazekage manor," she said as Kase smiled and nodded at her. Then he joined the others at the dining table to eat up and regain their strength after everything had happened. With everyone had a lovely evening and Kurora was talking to Tayuya and Hisui about where they'll be sharing the same room, which they didn't mind, but for tonight they're staying in Temari's room, which they both were happy about, and it would be felt weird for Tayuya since she hasn't slept in the same room as her sister in years, and being back with her family just felt like better heaven for her. As the evening was coming to a close as it's after 9 p.m. and Tamari, Naruto, and Hanabi had awakened from their nap and went to the dining table where Kushina was happy to heat up the leftover food for them, and just as she left in the kitchen Rasa, Kimba, Tsunade, and Jorogumo just returned in time to find everyone was having a family time together and enjoying everyone's company. But Rasa was happy how everyone would be living in the village and would be waiting in the morning, but then everyone looked at Jorogumo, who gave off a happy purr that everyone found a bit odd, and Jorogumo stopped eating and looked at everyone. "What? It's my first human food, and I love it," she said, giggling as she went back to eating while everyone was laughing with her and then at her as they'd never heard a yokai would be this harmless and adorable to purr, but deep down it was all an act for Jorogumo other than she is enjoying human food. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.